Yeah, oh, definitely. Especially towards the end, it was mostly all fake. The bad thing is that in those days there was no YouTube or no online stories, so there was no way to get the real version out, to get the truth out. And so most people in those days would just blindly believe anything that they read in print without questioning it, and there was no way that they could read any alternative media to give them the true facts.
Do you think there's still a lot of fake news these days?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of fake news these days. In some ways it's worse, in some ways it's better. The good thing these days is that there is alternative news, a lot of it online, a lot of it on YouTube and other sites. So what that does is it kind of keeps, to some extent, the fake news people in check, because they know that if they get too crazy with their fake news, that there will be counter stories appearing on YouTube channels with the real story. Now, in a lot of cases these days that doesn't slow them down. They still print their fake news, but they'll later have to retract it.
Did you ever try to discuss alternative views with people back then?
Yes, I did, absolutely. However, back in those days, people were a little bit more closed-minded, and they would blindly believe anything that they read in print, or they would also believe anything that they got, maybe second or third or fourth hand through what's called the telephone game news channel.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is this. You take the person at the top of the chain of the fake news chain, and what happens is they might read an article in the newspaper that's fake news, and maybe it was written by somebody who has a dog in the fight, somebody who's tied into corporate media, somebody who is pushing forward a narrative, somebody who wasn't there, but maybe they have a script that they're trying to put forward. But anyhow, for whatever reason, they publish their fake news story. Okay, and then you have the second person in the telephone news game. They read that story, and then they get parts of it. They don't question it, but then they relay it to the next person in the chain, and they'll leave out facts and they'll exaggerate things, and the story gets bigger and bigger, and then it goes to the third and the fourth person, and so on and so on. And so by the time you get to the end of the chain, you have a whole long chain of people that are all repeating various versions of fake news that have absolutely nothing to do with the real world, nothing to do with what really happened, because none of these people were there, including the writer of the story. And again, a lot of people, they just blindly believe whatever they read, whatever they hear, without question. They don't apply any critical thinking to any of their analysis. It's kind of a sad thing.
What were your main complaints with the SEC?
Well, regarding the SEC, in the beginning, before I met with them, I actually had a lot of respect for the SEC, and I held them in high regard, and I thought that they were, good, honest, ethical people. They were doing a tough job. However, after not only meeting with them for a whole day, but also having several conversations with them, I later lost a whole lot of respect for the SEC, and I came to realize that a lot of them were either completely corrupt, meaning they had no interest in pursuing the truth, which is supposed to be the goal of all government agents, is to pursue the truth. So they had no idea of pursuing the truth. Rather than pursuing the truth, they were trying to push forward some sort of weird, bogus narrative script and so forth. And the other thing is that a lot of them, if they weren't trying to push forward a script, they were just downright incompetent. So, for example, myself, when I met with them, I had already been in the business for several years, and I had several major licenses, a Series 7, a Series 63, Series 24. These are all national exams that you have to have a high level of competency to pass those. But what happens is the SEC, they'll take in sometimes training attorneys that don't know what they're doing. They don't know anything about the securities business, and their bosses will say, okay, here, we want you to do this, this, this. Here's your script, your plan. I need you to do this, that, and the other thing. And so they really don't even have a clue. Like, for example, when I met with them, I was really surprised that here they were supposedly investigating a case, they had several reverse mergers involved with it, and they didn't even know what the term reverse merger was. They didn't know who the biggest firms in the country were that were handling reverse mergers. None of them had a Series 7, none of them had a Series 63, none of them had a Series 24. They didn't understand the differences on how their rules conflict with the NASD rules, and how the NASD is actually the one who approves various securities to be listed on the pink sheets in the over-the-counter markets. So again, possibly, on some level they thought they were trying to do something, but they were just completely incompetent, and the worst part about it is they weren't even interested in learning. All they wanted to do is fulfill some sort of weird script that they had.
What was the corruption that later came out about the SEC?
Well, some years later, it came out that many people at the SEC were spending up to 8 hours a day doing nothing but downloading porn on their government-paid computers. Okay. Now, as a civil libertarian, I don't really care what somebody does in their own, on their own computer at home, after hours, whatever, blah blah blah. That's their business. But we're talking during the daytime, when they're being paid high salaries by the government, 9 to 5 during working hours on government-paid computers. They're downloading porn all day long, which means that they're not properly investigating cases. They're not properly thinking about things. Their minds are not working properly. And frankly, looking back, I question as to whether some of the people I dealt with there, if that's what they were doing all day long, because their brains were just not functioning properly.
Well, moving on, it is a shocking story to say the least that surfaced yesterday as the nation was in the midst of a financial meltdown in 2008. Employees at the Securities and Exchange Commission, who were supposed to be the watchdogs in all of this, were surfing for pornography while on the clock at the agency, some for as much as 8 hours a day. Their Inspector General's investigation lasted 5 years, found 33 employees that violated commission rules and policies.
Who was Roy Flynn of the SEC, and what happened with him?
Yeah. Okay. So Roy Flynn, he was one of the two chief investigators on this whole case. Him and Sue Leeds were two of the SEC attorney investigators. And so basically, I don't know if this was one of their first cases or what the issue was going on, but both those people showed complete incompetence on all levels. But now, Roy Flynn, he later would come out with a lawsuit against the SEC himself. So even though he was an SEC attorney investigator assigned to this case, one of the top investigators on this case, he later came out with a lawsuit suing the SEC, saying, in essence, that they were all incompetent and didn't know what they were doing. Okay. Now, shortly after that, and this is all public record, easily findable and searchable on the internet, Roy Flynn versus the SEC. And so what happened was, the SEC actually then fired Rory Flynn. Okay. And they said, no, he's the incompetent one. And then this went to court, and the judge basically said, that they're all pretty much incompetent. They all have points, that they're all making mistakes, they're all making errors, that they're all incompetent to some extent, and that's totally believable.
Did the SEC ever answer your questions, and why not?
No, not really. I had several really good questions that I asked of them. And by the way, this is after they told me that they wanted to talk to me and that they would answer all of my questions.
What were your questions?
Well, so I had questions, several questions. So the first question was, they were claiming, this is like years after the fact, that they now all of a sudden thought that one or several of the stocks that I had invested in or traded in were not registered properly. Okay, and that was the first I'd ever heard about that. And keep in mind that these same stocks that I had invested in were also traded by 27 major market-making firms, including Merrill Lynch, Charles Schwab, Dillon Securities, Nash Weiss Securities, many other big market-making firms. Okay, so they said, oh, well, you may have possibly committed a violation because something wasn't registered properly. Okay, now that's what's called in philosophy or argumentation, it's called a red herring. So meaning it's just kind of a bogus thing that somebody throws up there that has no basis in reality. Okay, and the reason is because, again, for years there were 27 major market-making firms that traded in the same stocks that I had traded in years before I'd even known about these securities in these stocks. Okay, so if something was not registered properly and they're trying to say, well, I bought an unregistered stock, well, okay, you got to bring in all these other 27 major market-making firms in as well, and each of them might have easily at least 10 to 20 people at each firm that are trading these stocks. So we could be talking 300 to 500, 600 people. Okay, but they just sit there and bring that point up to me without bringing in other companies and mentioning that it is pretty disingenuous, and it's a pretty bogus point, and they were completely wrong on that. So I pretty much called them on the carpet, and I said, okay, well, if these weren't registered properly, what about these other 27 major market-making firms that were trading them before I even heard about them? And you know what their answer was? Well, their answer was nothing. Silence. It's like silence is golden. Okay, so no answer. It's a simple answer. Just tell me. Okay, what But no, they can't tell me. And the reason is they can't tell me. Okay, because there is no reason. Because they're either making that up. Okay, and they know it's a bogus point. But whatever they say, they're kind of screwed, because they can say, well, those are Wall Street firms. We're nice to the Wall Street firms. We don't mess with the Wall Street firms. Okay, that's going to show the corruption. Or if they say, oh, well, we didn't think about that, then that's going to show their incompetence. Okay, so whatever answer they give is going to show either major corruption on their part or major incompetence on their part. Okay, so they didn't answer that question. Okay, then another question that came up. Well, first of all, just to backtrack, pretty much almost everybody that was with the company, the salespeople, the distributors, the corporate officers, the scientists, the doctors, the lawyers, the one thing most everybody who was there agreed on was that the products were good products. Okay, the LaPatch product was a good product. The Protectin product helped prevent diseases and viruses and bacteria. That was a good product. The isotonics were sports line products that were helpful to your body. Those were good products. So the main thing is that there were good products. Okay, there were also good people with the company, but that's another point. Okay, so at one point in one of our discussions, this SEC lady, junior attorney, whatever, she said, "Oh, they said that they had this and this product, and I said to her, and this is all recorded, by the way, as well. I said to her, are you saying that the products were not good products that this company had? And her reply is, well, I'm not going to discuss it. I'm not going to discuss the evidence. Okay, well, why? Okay, so that's a non-answer. Why not? Okay.
You see? Or are you saying that that their products weren't good products? I mean, I'm not. I mean, obviously I'm not going to argue the evidence. Okay.
If you don't think they're good products, tell me. No, she wouldn't say that. Okay. But she also implied that they're not good products, but she won't actually say that because she's wrong, and that's provable that she's wrong. So she was totally evasive in her non-answer. So, and the other problem is, okay, the other reason she wouldn't answer that is because there is no good answer for her. Because the problem is, if she admits that they're good products, which they were good products, and it was provable, the doctors, the scientists, the distributors all agreed that they were good products. So if she admits to that fact, well then 90% of her points in her case just go right into the toilet, okay, if she admits that the products are good. Okay. But then on the other hand, if she tries to say they're not good products, okay, then that's equally totally bogus and fallacious, because now if you think about it logically, okay, it breaks down to this, okay. You have all of these doctors, Dr. Larry Ford, who was one of the top doctors in the country at the time, he was a UCLA researcher. There was Dr. Kamala Sam, who was one of the inventors of the protectant product, okay. Dr. I think Joseph Iglesias and other doctors and other scientists and researchers, they're all saying that they're good products, okay, and they all have double-blind research reports and documentation showing that they're good products. People in the sports industry, they're all saying that they love the isotonics products, which were great sports products. Okay? So all of the qualified people are all saying it's a good product. So now we're supposed to believe some SEC trainee lady who's not a scientist, she's not a doctor, she knows nothing about products. We're now supposed to take her word for it, that she doesn't think they're good products. She's going to argue with the doctors. That's not her job. She's not a doctor. She's not a researcher. She has no basis to say that they're not good products. And I asked her the question, if she does, now if she has some researcher on her side, some doctors on her side, that say, well, these doctors did their own double-blind studies and they didn't like the products. Well, first off, show me her report, show me her evidence. She wouldn't show me that. She wouldn't discuss that. And she doesn't have that, okay? And that's also not even within the jurisdiction of the SEC, okay? So the whole point is totally bogus. It's what's called, again, it's a red herring, okay? It's a big lie, okay? It's got nothing to do with the SEC's business, okay? So the products, everybody agrees the products were great products, okay? Everybody agrees there were a lot of good people working for the companies, okay? They were good companies. This whole thing comes down to pretty much the main issue was that the FDA screwed everybody up by unconstitutionally changing the rules of the game late in the game at the last minute, and then the SEC comes in and compounds the product by halting trading on good legitimate companies and good legitimate stuff. So it was a complete government-created problem. That was the whole problem. Again, I refer back to President Ronald Reagan's statement. He said that government is not the solution to the problem, but government is the problem. And those words that President Reagan stated were never more true than they were in this case. Because if you take the FDA out of the equation with their dirty dealing and changing the rules, and you take the SEC out of the equation with their incompetency and their corruption of supporting big Wall Street firms over the little guys, if you take just those two organizations out, this would have been a good, wonderful company. The stocks would have soared probably, at least for a while, the distributors would have made money selling the products. The company would have grown. It would have been a good, happy situation. Okay, I totally agree with Ronald Reagan. This was a government-created problem. They came in, and in the final analysis, they solved nothing. There is not one bit of good that the government did in these situations. Every single thing they did was they crapped all over the company, they crapped all over the people, they ruined a lot of lives. There's no good at all that they did. They turned a really good situation into a total and complete disaster. Okay. Now they are a lot of them are just total liars, because if you ask them to say, "Well, we did good because we got these," at the end of it, we ran everything in the ground. We created a bunch of broke people, and then we got those broke people that didn't have money to fight us sign off and give us a draw and go away so we could save face, and blah blah blah. Okay. So that's their big victory. Okay, you ran a company into the ground so that big corporations could steal their good products. You cost a lot of people money. And what did you do? Oh, and then their other point is, well, see, they're not doing it. We fixed it so that now they're out of business. They lost their own money, their money, and they're not doing it again. That's one of the points I would say. Oh, see, they're not doing it. Well, they're not doing it. Doing what again? They were doing a good thing until you clowns came along, big government, and big business people came along and ruined it for everybody, and stole their products. So yeah, what they're not doing, what again? They're not going up against big business. They're not trying to succeed and have the entrepreneurial dream. Okay, so yeah, those people were just a complete disaster, and it's bad for America. It's bad for the country.
Has the SEC ever done this before?
Oh yes, numerous times. Numerous times. There's countless stories of how the SEC loves to pick on little companies. They do that all the time, hundreds of times. They'll go in and they will try to find some little company that forgot to dot an I, or they forgot to cross a T, or maybe they forgot to check a box on a form. And rather than help them and say, okay, hey, you got to dot this I here, you got to cross this T, no, they want to come in, they want to start like take a bulldozer to the company, just basically raise the company to the ground and steal all their stuff and put them out of business. Okay, so but they love to do that with little companies.
I've been writing about the SEC for 35, 40 years and how they protect Wall Street. That's what it's all about. They're not to protect the average investor. These people are as criminal as the people that we have in jails.
Okay. They almost never do that with big companies. Maybe once in a while, but rarely with big Wall Street companies, because Wall Street companies have a lot of money. They have a lot of high-priced attorneys. They can fight back. They win. Okay? But you pick on the little guys, the little companies, they can't fight back. Okay? So they destroy little companies, okay, and just run them out of business for no good reason. Well, there is one good reason, okay, and here's the reason is this, is that the SEC, they're trying to get little notches on their belt, they're trying to get things on their resume, okay, because their goal, a lot of these people, are to one day go into private practice, and they want to get these $1 million a year jobs, okay, and so the way they do it is they get these little notches on their belt, and they say, hey, look, I ran this company out of business. I ran these guys out of business. I did this, I did that. I got this guy to sign a consent decree. I got that guy to sign a consent decree. Even though they might be all good, honest companies, they're just trying their best. They don't care. If they can run somebody out of business, run a company out of business, they then somehow convert that into something that's positive on their resume. They don't care about the damage that they inflict. They're just trying to build up their resume, because their payoff is at some point later down the road, maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever, they're going to leave the SEC and they're going to get some high-priced job.
Alibaba
because
and Jack
I think
Ma.
the SEC is worthless in the first place, right, when it comes to enforcement. Seriously, that's my perspective. So, I mean, risk hedge. I do it because I don't trust the uncertainties, and I don't trust that the SEC is taking the right steps.
You come to this agency, treat it like a business. What would you do?
You'd have to burn it down and start from the beginning.
Is there nothing salvageable about the SEC as
I'm not saying it's not salvageable.
I'd say in a perfect world that's a good idea. I just don't think it's possible.
Well, what you could do is
erase the SEC.
No,
and
but
start
what you
over.
could.
Okay. It's the same way that the cronies at the FDA, they do their thing. They steamroll over a lot of companies, and at some point, a lot of these big-time FDA heads, they will leave the FDA, and then they'll go to work for Merck or one of the big pharmaceutical companies, and they're going to get like a $2-3 million a year salary job as a CEO or a vice president, and then they're going to get $10 million in stock bonuses and travel expenses and on and on and on. Okay, so it's all this corruption in the system. They're not trying to help the public. They're not serving the public at all. And a lot of this stuff has been pointed out by people like Ron Paul, has pointed this out for years.
I think this whole episode of the SEC now filing charges against Goldman Sachs, it proves the SEC is inefficient. You know, they're supposed to prevent problems, and here they're coming up 3 years late making charges. And what do we want to do? Give them more power to regulate, and I think they've proved that they're a total failure.
And Milton Friedman, who was a Nobel Prize winner in economics, he pointed out for years that a lot of these government agencies, including the FDA and the SEC, are doing a complete disservice to the country. And he stated that, yeah, okay, every once in a while they might do a little bit of good, but the bad that they do far outweighs what little good that they may occasionally do. And so he thought that these agencies are not needed for the most part, and at a minimum should either be done away with or scaled down, or possibly some of the duties could be handled by private companies and so forth. And again, we're not talking about having anarchy where you have no regulation, you have no government watching anything. No, we're for some limited regulation. We are for having people act in a good, fair, legal manner. Okay, but we want government, but we want smart and intelligent agencies that do things in a fair and a correct manner. Okay, we don't want this corruption where they just want to steamroll people, steamroll innocent companies, so they can get a few notches on their belt, so they can then try to get some high-priced job. Okay, so there's an old saying, and that is power corrupts. And so the more power these agencies have, the more corrupt they become. So yeah, I think we should have some regulatory agencies, and they should be overseeing some things. But you don't want them so big and powerful that they get in bed with the big corporations and they start ruining everything for all the little guys, all the little companies.
Do you think that the SEC should be disbanded?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the SEC should definitely be disbanded because, like Milton Friedman, the Nobel Prize winning economist, said that they do much more harm than they do good. And from what I saw, it was a mixture of corruption and a mixture of high levels of incompetence. You can't get an answer from them. I've asked them several questions. They don't answer the questions. I've even talked to other people. You call their general lines. You ask them questions. They can't give you an answer. They change the rules. They don't even know what the rules are themselves. They have no clue as to what they're doing. They don't even understand the difference between what their jurisdiction is and what the NASD jurisdiction is. And oftentimes they will have conflicts with the NASD. And so just to kind of explain what that means is, for a stockbroker, they basically are under the jurisdiction of both the SEC and the NASD. But in a practical day-to-day sense, they're actually more closely under the jurisdiction of the NASD. The NASD is the National Association of Securities Dealers. And so the National Association of Securities Dealers, what they do is they basically approve the over-the-counter stocks, the growth stocks, which these were, and they go through an approval process, and once they're approved, they will list them on what's called the pink sheets. Okay, so the NASD is the ones who actually approve it for trading and put it on the pink sheet. So if they're not on the pink sheets, then they can't be traded. Okay, if they are, then they can, and that means that's been approved by the NASD. So, like the people that I spoke to, the junior attorneys, I think they were new at this job. They didn't even understand that. They had no securities licenses. I already had a Series 7 license, a Series 63 license, a Series 24 license, which is a manager's license. They didn't have any of those licenses. They didn't even understand how the process works. They didn't even know what the pink sheets were. They didn't even know that the NASD is the organization that approves it on the pink sheets and listed on the pink sheets. Okay, like one of the ladies, attorneys that I spoke to, she was under some sort of weird, crazy notion that she thought that stockbrokers are supposed to, every time they want to trade a growth stock, that they're supposed to stop and contact the corporate headquarters and ask them to send them a registration statement. Okay, now that's totally crazy, insane. Nobody does that. That's not the way the process works. That would slow the whole thing down. And in those days, that's before email and internet was very prevalent, and so they would have to mail everything. So if somebody wants to buy a stock, what they're supposed to say, spend a couple of hours to try to get all of corporate headquarters and say, hey, I need a registration sent. Now they're going to wait 5 days for a registration statement to be sent in the mail. No, that's just totally insane. It shows like zero understanding, zero comprehension under her part. That's not how the process worked. The way the process worked for years, and every stockbroker knows this, is if you want to buy a growth company, which is called an OTC, over the counter, you would look in the what's called the pink sheets. Okay, if it's listed under the pink sheets, that means that it's been approved for trading by the NASD, and you just put your order right there and you buy it. Boom, end of story. Or you sell it. End of story. That's the way the process works. That's the way every stockbroker does it. Now again, we're talking for smaller OTC companies. That's the way the process works. So again, the attorney that I spoke to, she wasn't even familiar with that process. Haven't even heard about that. Didn't even know about that. Okay. Other questions I asked her. So knowing how the process works and having multiple securities licenses, I had much more information about how everything works than she does. And I was totally surprised. I thought that these were going to be smart, sophisticated people that knew what they were doing. But I found totally incompetent, ignorant people. Okay, so she said, oh, it's supposed to work this way, and you're supposed to call the company and get a registration statement every time you want to buy or sell stock. Totally insane. Okay, so I said, okay, look, I said that you're saying, okay, 27 major market-making firms are trading these companies. Okay, they're approved by the NASD. They're listed on the pink sheets. Okay, they're being bought and sold years before I even heard about it. I said, okay, I said, so if you've got some sort of special process that somebody's supposed to do, or they're supposed to ask for some form, you're saying, then what are they supposed to do? You tell me. What is that? What is this process? What are they supposed to ask for then? Okay. Now, when I asked her that question, I knew I was kind of setting her up because it was more of a rhetorical question. I knew she was totally insane, or she was just totally bluffing with a red herring. So I'm kind of calling the bluff. Okay. So what is this? What are they supposed to do then to show that it's registered? Is what I'm asking her. And her answer was one of the stupidest, most dumb, lame responses you could ever imagine. Okay. And she said, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe you should just ask the people you work for or something, or ask your attorney. Okay. Now that's a totally lame, retarded response, because, and it shows me the level of incompetence and the level of corruption. Okay. Because the whole point is, I know what the process is. All of the stockbrokers know what the process is. You look on the pink sheets, and if it's there, it's approved for trading. And then she's saying, no, there's some other new process that nobody knows about but her. Okay? That no other stockbroker, all of these 27 major market-making firms, they all know what the process is. But she's got some new process that shows whether something's registered. Okay? And so I say, okay, so what is your system? What is your process? And all she can say is, I don't know, you can't ask me, you got to ask the people you work for, or you got to ask your attorney. Okay, that's like a non-answer. Okay, and it's a bad non-answer. I mean, it's just absurd. So right then, that's confirmation that I'm dealing with brain dead. I don't know if she was just watching too much porn that day, or what her problem was, or if she is just like completely brain dead, has not even investigated this case, has no clue. Oh, okay. And then another thing she said to me, she said, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a test that stockbrokers are supposed to take, and then we'll teach them those things. Okay. Another lame answer on multiple levels, because first off, had she done any research, she would have known that the person she was talking to, which was me, had already passed and had 3 major national licenses. A Series 7 securities broker's license, a Series 63, the all states license that allows you to practice in all 50 states. A Series 24, which is a high-level license I had also, which is a manager's license. It gives you the ability to manage the whole branch or whole office. Okay, and she's just saying, well, she doesn't know. Maybe something's on the test. Okay, so what that tells me right away is I'm dealing with a total insane retard. Okay, that she can't answer any of my questions, and she's giving me the lamest of all answers. And what's going through my mind is, egad, you are the investigator on this case, and you can't even answer the most basic questions that any stockbroker, and you're giving me just the most lamest, laughable answers. Okay. So anyhow, needless to say, that just tells me they have zero interest in the truth. They don't know what they're doing. They're total clowns. Rory Flynn, one of the investigators, he was totally right that these people were total clowns, total inefficient people, and they just had no idea what they're doing.
So was there a conflict between the SEC and the NASD?
Yeah, there absolutely was, and apparently they do have ongoing conflicts from time to time over the years, conflicts over jurisdiction and conflicts over what their responsibilities are, and so forth. So the SEC is the Securities Exchange Commission and Securities and Exchange Commission. The NASD is the National Association of Securities Dealers. Okay, and they actually work a little bit closer with the brokers on a more kind of a hand-in-hand daily basis. Okay? But occasionally they disagree on things, which is kind of absurd, because they need to get together and figure out what the rules are amongst each other. So the NASD informs the brokers, and okay, this is the rules, this is how the process works, this is the system, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So the NASD sets forth the rules, and they'll say, okay, here's the process. All approved securities go through us. Once we approve it, we list it on the pink sheets, and then it's available for trading. Okay? So then the SEC later tells me, oh no, well no, that's not the process at all. We have some new process now where you're supposed to contact the CEO of every single company that you want to buy a stock from, and you're supposed to ask him for some special registration statement. Okay, that's not the process. That's not the way it goes. Okay, so they need to call the SEC and get their story straight. Okay, now in that case, the NASD happens to be right. That's the way they've done it for years. That's the way every stockbroker does it. But you've got some weird new lady who doesn't have a clue as to what she's doing. She's like dreaming of this whole new process on her own. Okay, but there's other conflicts that they have also from time to time, and it's kind of unfair for them to put a broker in the middle of their own dispute. Okay, because if they have a disagreement on what the process should be, or if the SEC wants to change it, okay, then they need to get together with the NASD and work out whatever that new process should be. So in other words, if the SEC, if they're saying, hey, we don't like the process that you are implementing, and the process that you've been telling thousands or tens of thousands of brokers to do for years, we want to change it. We want you to throw the pink sheets away. Don't do that anymore. We want, every time somebody wants to buy a single share in a stock, they all have to contact the CEO of a company, and they have to send them a special registration form. That's our new process. Okay, well, then if that's the way they want to do it, work that out with the NASD. Don't be putting a broker, an innocent broker, in the middle of your conflict. And again, they've had other conflicts as well.
Okay. Did the NASD list the stocks on the pink sheets?
Yes, absolutely. So the NASD, at least at that time, they had, and again, we were talking for small cap OTC, which is over-the-counter stocks. Okay, so they would have these pink sheets, and they would come out pretty much on a daily basis, or pretty much on a periodic basis, and so every stockbroker knows that once it's on the pink sheets, once it's listed there, you can now buy it, you can sell it. That's the way it works. Now, if it gets delisted, then it doesn't show up on the pink sheets, and then you can't buy it, you can't sell it, you can't trade it. Okay, so that's the process that every broker knew about it at least that time. I don't know if they've changed the process since then, because I've been out of business for a number of years. But in those days, that's how the process had worked.
Why do you think the SEC did what they did?
Well, okay, I think that they did what they did for a few reasons. Okay, so I think number one, they did what they did for some political reasons. Okay, and they're trying to get brownie points. Okay, number two, they probably got bombarded with some calls or some complaints from some investors who were upset and who were lying to the SEC and didn't tell them or forgot to point out some critical facts that they had bought some non-solicited order stocks. Okay, and the SEC were so incompetent that they didn't ask that question, which is a basic question that everybody should ask, at least if you're in that business or that agency. Okay, and the SEC people were not that bright, not that intelligent, and they weren't able to see through what was a lie and what was truthful. So in other words, if a disgruntled investor calls them and they say, "Oh, I'm upset because I bought this and it went down," blah blah, yada yada yada. Okay, that's fine, but they need to ask some intelligent questions and find out, okay, is this guy telling me the truth? Is he giving me the full story, or is he leaving out some facts? Okay, so I don't think that the SEC did that. Okay, and also the SEC, they kind of jumped on the bandwagon and they saw an opportunity. They saw, okay, this company's already weak and already going down, and they thought, okay, well, they can jump on the bandwagon and they can try to maybe get some brownie points and act like, okay, hey, we're the heroes, we're gonna help people, we're gonna save people. When the reality is they did absolutely nothing to help anybody, and all they did was screw up a lot of people's lives, screw up people's investments, make things worse. So now beyond that, there could have been some tie-ins from bigger Wall Street companies where that have favor with the SEC, that the Wall Street companies, the bigger ones, they're always happy to see smaller companies go out of business, and that's been known for like decades. That the big companies don't like the small companies because the small companies are competition for them, and the small companies sometimes make the big companies cut their commissions in order to be competitive. So that's just been an ongoing thing. So that's why the SEC, they always cater to the big Wall Street companies, and they're somewhat manipulated by them and so forth. But I don't know every reason why they did, but I do know that what they did was thoroughly corrupt, ill thought out, incompetent. I know that they lied to me on multiple occasions. I know that they did not answer my basic questions, and when they said they would answer questions, they wouldn't answer the questions, and they showed that they have no business in that agency investigating something when they don't even know what a reverse merger is, and they're investigating a case that has multiple reverse mergers. They don't even know the main companies that are handling reverse mergers in the U.S. They don't even know what the pink sheets are. There's just point after point after point. I mean, I can't say for sure, but I kind of got the idea that the SEC attorneys that I spoke to were possibly somebody that barely graduated law school, possibly on an affirmative action program or something like that, and squeak through law school, and then they get out and they're not good enough to go into private enterprise, so they throw in an application, they get a job as a new SEC attorney, they're wet behind the ears, they come in, they have very little training, and they go, okay, here you go, you got to investigate this case, and they're like, oh, okay, well, what's this about? What do I do? Don't worry, we'll tell you what to do. Here's the deal. You investigate this case. I've already decided that these guys are guilty and they need to go down. So you just fill in the blanks and try to run these guys out of business. That's it. And that's kind of the feeling that I got about the SEC people that I had dealt with.
Do you think that some people's thinking was all wrong and that they let the false narratives influence their thinking?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So part of the problem is that, not just in this case, but with a lot of cases, there's a real lack of ability of people to be able to think through problems or to show any critical thinking. Okay. Now, it's not easy to do critical thinking, and if you've never done it before, it's hard. It can hurt your brain for some people. Okay. But for some of us that do that, we actually love it. We love to think through things. Okay. But for a lot of people, thinking through a problem is really hard on the brain. It's painful for them to think through something. So meaning they would rather have a fake news story or fake news narrative spoon-fed to them, and then that's it. Then they don't want to think about that. They don't want to think through whether that story is true. They don't want to think through, okay, what are the motives? Who has a dog in the fight? Okay, this is all part of critical thinking. Okay, who has a dog in the fight? You know, who's right? Who's wrong? What's going on? Is this really? Does this make any logical sense?
Do you think that any of the corporatist stories were correct, or were they filled out with false and negative narratives?
So all of the stories that I saw towards the end, they were all completely 100% incorrect, but they all did have half-truths. So they all were littered with half-truths. So again, what's a half-truth? They had some correct names in there. They had some correct events, some correct data points, but they were mixed in with and seeded with exaggerations and things taken out of context and so many distortions that in its entirety it created what's called a false narrative. Okay, so they created false narratives. Yes, certain elements were true, but the narratives were all totally untrue. So here's a small example. Okay, they would say, "Oh, well, this company was selling an illegal diet patch." Okay, now that's a half truth. Sure, at one point the diet patch became illegal. Okay, but in the initial stages it was a legal diet patch. Okay, but they don't point that out. All they want to talk about is the negative stuff. So these corporatist articles were all overly negative. All they want to do is give the negative side and say, "Oh, they were selling." They would repeat that mantra. You know, it's almost like Johnny Cochran saying, "If it doesn't fit, you must have quit." Well, their mantra was they were selling an illegal diet patch. Okay, that's half the side of the story. Yes, it eventually became illegal, but in the early stages, it was legal. Now, here's another big lie that they told. Okay, they would say, "Oh, well, these investors bought stock in a company that sells illegal diet patches." Okay, now that's 100% damnable lie. Okay, because, and it is a half truth. Half of it's true, but it's overall lie. And here's the point: is this? The investors that bought stock in the company at the time they bought stock in the company, it was a legal patch. Okay, it was a legal product. Okay, and so when they then say, the lying writers of these articles and the shills, the corporate shills, when they then say, well, they bought stock in a company that sells illegal patches, that's 100% misleading and a total lie. Because the point is that if by the time the patch was made illegal, nobody was buying any stock at that point. Nobody was buying any product. It was pretty much a dead issue. Okay, then they were just waiting in a holding pattern, hoping that things would turn around. Okay, so the correct and the proper way of writing the article, which they never would do because they're tied into the corporatist shills and so forth. But if they want to be accurate, they would say it like this: investors bought stock in a company that sold a legal diet patch. Later, some months later, after they bought the stock, or whatever, months, weeks, whatever, but sometime later, after they bought their stock in the legal patch company, the FDA changed the rules and they turned a legal product into an illegal product. Okay, now they thereby, mathematically, now they owned stock in a company that had a patch that they could not sell because the FDA made it illegal. Okay. Now, I said a lot more words, but I've clearly more defined the situation as to what happened. Okay, but they don't do it. They give such a negative spin. But again, the average person has no, they don't have a degree in philosophy. They're not chess masters. They're not thinking through these problems. They're just in a rush. They're reading this article, and after they read the article, they're like, okay, I got to go grab some donuts. They don't have time to think through this thing. So if you read their spin, you're going to get a total false picture, total false narrative of what happened. You see, so they paint a totally totally wrong picture. So that whole thing is totally corrupt. The way everything they did, the whole mechanism of making the legal product into an illegal product, and then having spun stories wrong, and just everything that they did was totally wrong, and it violates all kinds of libertarian principles. And again, this is why people like Ron Paul and many others, and libertarians, and Milton Friedman, they all want to disband a lot of these agencies. They want to reduce big government, and big government and corporate America, they are screwing this country. They're killing this country in so many ways.
How much importance was the financing a part of the company?
Well, I would say a small portion of the activities from what I saw. So to keep in mind that for any company, especially a public company, it takes money to run any business. You have overhead, you have office rent, you have employees, you have light bills, electricity, and a whole host of other expenses. So basically, these are not government agencies where they just get free money from the taxpayers. So any public company, any business at all, public or non-public, has overhead. They have expenses. So part of the duties of any company is to raise some capital, whether it's through financing, debt, equity investments, or sales, to keep the business running. So, like, according to the fake news articles that I saw, they tend to imply that that was a major part of the company, and that's all they were doing was raising money or selling stocks or whatever. And that's all nonsense. That's all spin. That's all false, faulty narrative. Yeah, there was a small portion of the company's attention spent on raising funds to pay overhead and do acquisitions, and that's what they need to do. I mean, that's how you run a business. So anybody that has been in business or has ran a business understands that there are bills, there's overhead. So anyhow, but from what I saw, the majority of the company's time was spent on sales and distribution and new products and marketing the products and acquisitions and a lot of other things. So it's hard to say. And again, I visited from time to time. I wasn't part of the company or the inner workings, but from what I saw, maybe they spent 5 or 10% on raising funds to pay the corporate expenses and whatnot, and that's what any business would do in that time, in that situation.
Any inaccurate news stories?
Oh gosh, yeah. So again, whenever we talk about the company or the business or whatever, you have to split everything up. Before the FDA changed the rules and after. So you almost have two companies. So you got the before and you got the after. It's kind of like we have a BC and an AD. So before the laws were changed, most of the stories actually were very good, very accurate, very positive. They had a lot of good things. All the local newspapers, the LA Times, the Register, and other national newspapers had a lot of good things to say about the company. Press releases, they talked about the new products. They talked about divisions and companies that they acquired and so forth. So I would say the majority of those were all positive and they were all fairly accurate. Now, after Big Pharma did their thing and changed the rules, and then the corporatists started attacking them, and the shills started attacking them in the press, then the majority of the articles were not only very negative, but they were extremely inaccurate. Extremely inaccurate. Again, they had some various half-truths. They would get some of the names right. They'd get spellings right. They would get a few little tidbit details in there, but the overall themes were completely wrong, completely inaccurate, completely misleading, and total. It was total fake news. After the rules had changed. So yeah, I mean, it was like there was no regard for the truth whatsoever. I mean, I remember a few times myself knowing a little bit about what was going on, just doing my due diligence, and then reading some of the articles, and you'd be thinking, well, gee, what company is this? Or like, and then you're thinking, well, who is this person? And you see some name you've never seen before, and it's like, okay, well, some dude who's never been there, doesn't know anything about it. Now he's writing some bogus negative articles based on what, like hearsay or some script that somebody handed him, and he really had like no idea what he was talking about.
Okay. Were there any inaccurate news stories?
Yeah. So again, towards the end, literally most of the news stories were totally and completely inaccurate, completely misleading, had heavy spin on it. They left out key facts, pertinent facts, details. So yeah, it's like whoever was putting out those articles had an agenda and zero regard for the truth whatsoever.
What would have happened if the FDA never changed the rules?
Oh gosh, had the FDA not changed the rules and the company been allowed to sell the product in a free market as everything was intended from the beginning and to move forward, it would have been a tremendously positive situation. The company would have grown, they would have expanded. The 22,000 distributors that they already had, that could have easily grown much higher to 32, 42,000, maybe 100,000. Sales would have gone through the roof. The stock would have most probably ended up somewhere in the $5 range, $10 range, maybe $20 range, and this was starting out at the 12.5 cent level. And I'm basing that on the fact that earlier on the organization had a stock that came out at 12.5 cents, and it went up to about $2.50, and that was before they even had their best products, and that was before they even had the 22,000 distributors selling the products, and before all kinds of other positive things. So just based on that, it did very well. So with all of the positive momentum that they had going for them, I think that the stocks would have done extremely well. And that's the general consensus. That's not only me that thinks that. That's just pretty much most everybody that was there and that was connected to the situation. So you would have had a lot of happy people, and you would have had a lot of good products that were distributed on the market. It would have been a win-win situation for everybody. So again, the changing the rules by the FDA did a whole lot of damage to everybody, ruined the company, ruined a lot of people's lives, cost a lot of people money. It just, again, it's another example of reckless big business just trampling over a small company, using their friends in big government agencies to do the dirty work, and then using their other friends in the press to lie about what happened to try to damage the credibility. That's an old Maoist tactic that the communist Mao from China used to do. He was more concerned about trying to kill the credibility of his opponents than he was killing them. So, and he would usually actually do both. A lot of times he would first try to kill their credibility, and then he would actually come in and try to kill them. So not only were these big government agencies using Nazi tactics, but they were also using Maoist communist tactics to try to hurt the credibility of the very companies and people that they were hurting and attempting to destroy, and ultimately succeeding in destroying.
Were there any newspaper writer shills for the corporatist or big pharma companies?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so because some of the articles that I read during that time frame were very negative, and they were almost looking like they were just a script that were handed to them, written directly to try to attack the company, to hurt their credibility, to bring them down, to drive them out of business. And these were written from people who were not there, people that didn't work at the company, people that weren't around, people that really had no knowledge or no clue as to what they were even writing about. I mean, they were supposedly discussing things that they were purporting to have inside information, but they couldn't possibly have that kind of information because nobody knew them. I never saw them. People I knew never saw them. And they also were getting everything mostly wrong. For example, one time they had a big meeting, the news source company had a big meeting, thousands of people showed up, and a shill from the local news station, some guy who was supposedly a big-time local newscaster on television, he showed up and talked to a few people, and he totally screwed up all of the information. So, for example, the company had several different product lines and different types of products. Okay, so for example, they had the diet patch product, the little patch that they were marketing, and then they had a totally different and separate product line called the protectant product line, and that was a product that killed viruses and bacteria. It was antiviral and antibacterial, and so and it was proven to kill the AIDS virus in laboratory double-blind study tests and so forth. And it was developed by some leading doctors, one of them being Dr. Kamal Hassan. But anyhow, so the news reporter, he totally, I don't know if he did this intentionally or he was just an airhead or whatever, but he went on the news that night and he tried to criticize the company. And he said, yeah, there's this big meeting, thousands of people here, blah, 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 and they've got all these products, and they even claim to have a patch that kills AIDS. Okay, and the company never had any such product. They never claimed to have any such product. And he just mixed up all of his notes, okay? And he made it seem like the company was a scam or that they were making stuff up and this stuff was too unbelievable, okay? Now, it was actually pointed out to him that he was totally wrong and he messed up, and it was clear that he got all of his facts wrong. And apparently, I heard that some days later, somebody from his news station did a retraction, and they said, "Oh, sorry, we messed up the story. That they really don't have a patch that kills AIDS. They have a diet patch, but then they have another soap product that kills viruses." Blah blah blah. Okay, so they did some sort of retraction, but the problem is they did the retraction at a time when very few people watched it, and the damage had already been done. You see? So constantly there would be shill reporters like that. I think his name was Larry something, I can't fully remember, but there was these shill reporters like him that they were either lazy airheads or they were purposefully screwing everything up, getting the stories all wrong, and that continued to do damage to the company and to chip away at things.
Did the FCC ever lie to you, and were they tricky at all?
Yes, so the SEC had personally lied to me multiple times. So they said that they would, if I went out there to talk with them, they would cover my hotel expenses. They never did. I flew out there, I got to the hotel. They did not have a room waiting for me. I had to use a credit card that I did not want to use at that time, but I had no choice. I almost turned around, flew back, canceled the meeting because they had lied to me on that, but I decided to go ahead and do that. Anyhow, they said initially, oh, they just want to talk to me, they just had a few questions, they wanted to talk to me, it might take an hour or so or whatever. When I flew out there, met with them, I actually ended up spending the whole day, I'd say pretty much 8-9 hours the whole day talking to them. And also, they didn't even have any legitimate questions. They had no good questions. I was there to help them. I was there to straighten out any misconceptions that they may have had. But they had, I would say, not a single one good, honest question. I mean, what they had was, they had tricky questions or gotcha questions where they were trying to plug holes in their narrative, and they were trying to prove some sort of script that they had. But I would say it was just a complete waste of time, and they were completely dishonest about their whole approach on multiple levels.
Was there anything sinister going on in the background?
Yeah, I believe that there was. I believe that there was some big company, big corporatist influences that were pulling the strings, and a lot of these people, the agencies, were just merely puppets that were doing the dirty work of big corporations that wanted to run the little company out of business so they could then take over their products and make a lot of profits on it. And the hypocrisy, well, there were multiple hypocrisies, but one of the big hypocrisies was that they would publish these articles saying, oh, there's no way that a skin patch could ever work. It's impossible technology. It's a bogus idea. Even though there already were skin patches on the market and the transdermal was already a proven technology on the market, but they would still nevertheless criticize and saying it's impossible. Okay, and these are just like newspaper writers that knew nothing about science, and they didn't even understand medical technology. That those products already were, similar types of products were on the market. But then later, the hypocrisy of the whole thing is that after they ran the company out of business, roughly a year later, the big pharma companies picked up the very same products and just renamed it a different name, and were making huge profits with the very same products. One of them you may have heard called the Nicoderm patch, which has made billions of dollars. Okay, and that was originally developed and slated to come out from the New Source company. They had the La Patch, which was the diet patch, the weight loss patch, and they were going to be coming out with their own version of the smoking patch, and they had other patches. Okay, and so it was a good technology. It was developed by some of the top doctors in the country, and so I mean, it's one thing to be honest about it and say, okay, hey, it was a great product, it was good, but for some whatever reason the FDA decided not to allow it. Okay, that would have been an honest assessment, but no, they have to throw in their lives and say, oh no, it's a bogus product and it can't possibly work, and the whole concept of transdermal doesn't make any sense. Okay, when it was already proven technology. So again, just lie after lie, spin after spin. Those articles could not be trusted at all.
Did your company ever cold call investors or sell in the traditional sense?
No, absolutely not. So we never cold called investors. We never talked anybody into buying any stock. I was already an very experienced professional stockbroker who had done that for several years and had 3 major licenses, including a Series 24 manager's license, a Series 7, which is a standard stockbroker's license, a Series 63 license, which qualified me to practice in all 50 states. So I already knew all the rules and had a very high level of professional ethic and so forth. And even though I had personally invested in these stocks, I still never pushed it on anybody, and still never solicited anybody, and only had a policy at that time of only accepting non-solicited orders. And part of the reason is that, even though I thought that there were great chances, I still understood that with any growth company, there's always a risk that something could turn down. They could run out of financing, rules could change, there could be competition. There's a number of things, and also it's a known fact that with new businesses, not that this was a brand new business, but just with new businesses, 80% of them don't even last the first 5 years. So there's always a risk. So we only accepted non-solicit orders, and we did have a lot of non-solicit orders come in because people would refer other people to us, and that they would call with their mind made up that they wanted to buy this stock, and we would take the order. But again, we did require that in order for us to complete their order or the purchase, they had to sign a non-solicited form whereby they signed a statement. Basically, it's a standard statement. They signed a statement indicating that this was their choice, their decision, and it was not made, that their decision was not made on the basis of any statements or representations that we made, and they had contacted us, we did not contact them.
Were the products good products?
The products were great products, and everybody that was there at that time all loved the products. And that was people from salespeople, distributors, multi-level people loved the products. There were attorneys, businessmen, they all loved the products. There were a lot of doctors around that they all loved the products. And most of these products were developed by doctors and high-level researchers. So absolutely, they were good products. Nobody ever had anything negative to say about the products other than some shill newspaper writers who were not there and would write things like, "Oh, I don't understand how a patch could work. A patch working makes no sense to me." Even though it was already transdermal technology was already a proven technology. They had already for years people were using what's called a nitroglycerin patch for people who are heart patients, and that would help regulate their blood pressure and so forth. So it was already a proven technology. But again, you'd have these airheads or shills, whatever you want to call them, they would just write these totally retarded, lame statements that showed that they did no research and had no idea what they were talking about.
Were people freaking out in those days and going crazy?
Yes, a lot of people were freaking out all over the place, going crazy, and some people were running around like chickens with their heads cut off. They were panicking, and it was a lot of pressure for a lot of people, especially for some of the news source multi-level distributors, because a lot of them, they had what's called a downline. And again, I've never been in the multi-level business myself, but I kind of learned a little bit about how it works. And so they would have this what's called a downline, and that's like a whole group of distributors, and some of them might have dozens, some might have hundreds, some might have thousands, and so they would basically bring their whole downline into the company and get them all all hyped up, and get them prepped and sell the products, and give them training, and let them know about, okay, these are the opportunities. And then so when the FDA changed the rules, suddenly that pretty much pulled out the rug from under them, and they were kind of freaked out because they're all ready to buy the product, and a lot of them did buy the product. There was millions of dollars worth of products that were sold, and now all of a sudden those people wanted refunds, and now they're nervous about whether the company's going to make it, and then again, a few of those people were investors and bought shares in the company, and now all of a sudden with the FDA changing the rules, their shares were now illiquid, they couldn't sell, and all they could do was just wait and hope that things would turn around. So it created a lot of nervous energy, a lot of negativity, and some of those people would unfairly just lash out at anybody and everybody around them, whoever it was. So it was very frustrating for a lot of people.
What were your worst memories in those days?
Right. So there were actually a lot of bad memories in those days, and part of it was the frustration of not being able to do more, not being able to help more. I mean, we did all we could do to help, we helped our clients as much as we could. We explained things as much as we could. Sometimes we would have like dozens of people calling, and we were really busy. We would try to take every call that we could, but sometimes it was impossible to take every single call because we had a lot of work to do. And sometimes some of these people, they would call and they would want to stay on the phone for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it would be the same questions and there wasn't really much that we could do. So the question is, well, when's the stock going to open? And we had no control over that. Again, we're just order takers and brokers, so we don't control all of these details. And they want to know other questions, and we would answer the questions the best we could in an honest and professional manner. But when you start getting dozens and dozens of calls like that all the time, and you can't get any work done, and there's nothing really, nothing you can really do to help them. At that point, it gets kind of frustrating for everybody, and so again, all we could do is hope, keep our fingers crossed, hope that the situation was going to turn around. But it was an insurmountable situation, and basically, it was kind of bad seeing a lot of people that were nervous and frustrated and upset and so forth. So it was a little bit like a sinking ship, and all we can do is watch the ship go down, try to help out a little bit, try to pour water out of the ship, but you can only do so much. So basically, then at some stages things got real nasty. Some people started biting each other, metaphorically, not physically, but attacking each other, because then some people wanted to take over the companies and take over the products and control this and control that, and they were panicking and rushing and so forth, and people were losing patience. A lot of people were really nice, but it was kind of difficult, because we tried to be so nice to everybody when we could, but we weren't we weren't magicians, we weren't wizards. We couldn't just snap our fingers and have everything turn out the way that we wanted it to turn out.
What were some of your best memories of those days?
Well, the best memory is the fact that despite all the harassment that we got from multiple sides, and the fact that we were losing money and losing business and losing the company, losing everything, that people were threatening us and harassing us and so forth, that we never ever gave in and compromised our integrity or our honesty. So we always kept our integrity. We were always completely honest. We always did the right thing, and no matter how difficult things got, and we were always faithful to our principles. And I suppose those are lessons that I learned from my mother. That she was a very honest, upright person that had a lot of integrity and faithfulness and so forth. So we always, no matter how ugly and difficult things got, we always maintained our high level of principles.
Why do you think the SEC harassed you as a very small player in this, and left alone the large 27 market makers on Wall Street?
Well, yeah, so a couple of reasons. Number one is total hypocrisy on their part. Okay. Because again, they came up with some weird bogus claim that something wasn't registered properly. They never really clarified what their issue was, despite me asking them multiple times. But traditionally, it's always easier to go after small people that don't have resources. Okay, and so with the bigger brokerage firms, the 27 bigger brokerage firms that were trading the same exact securities years before I even knew of them or anything about this, they didn't want to touch them, because those companies all have a lot of money and they can fight back and they would be able to prove how absurd the SEC claims were. However, with me, I think they kind of harassed me a little bit for a couple of reasons. They knew that they had kind of wiped me out and that I didn't have much money at that point, and so that I wasn't in a position to be fighting back. So they were clear with that, and so it's easy pickings. And the other thing is that at one point early on, I had actually rented a small executive office space in the same building that the company, the main company, was located, and I had maybe 150 square feet or so. But it was my own independent office, had my own lock key, They were on the other side of the building. I wasn't in their offices. It was just the same building. So I have no idea what they were doing. They have no idea what I'm doing. But perhaps to the SEC, they think, oh, okay, well, that's too close for comfort. We don't like the fact that this dude's in the same office building. He must be tied into the company. He must know everything that they're thinking, everything that they're doing. He must be part of the group or whatever. I have no idea what's going on through their heads, but that could have had something to do with why they were harassing people.
Did you lose respect for the SEC after that?
Yes. I lost total respect for the SEC, and before that I had a lot of respect for them. But after that, I lost respect on multiple levels for different reasons. I mean, number one, I could see that they were completely incompetent, and again, it wasn't just me who thought that. The very people who worked for the SEC and were involved in this investigation at the SEC, they also claimed that their own people were incompetent. So yeah, I saw that they were completely incompetent. I saw that they were unwilling to listen, unwilling to learn, and I saw that there was a level of corruption with them. So yeah, I completely lost all confidence and respect for the SEC. And if it were me, I would say just let's disband the SEC, and I would get rid of them today. Since then, the SEC has had a whole lot of mixed results. They've probably done some good, but they've done a lot of bad. They've messed up a lot of things. They have a lot of conflicting rules. I'm not even sure of the good things that they've done. I'm just assuming that hopefully they must have done something good. But most all the stories that I've heard and other independent stories have all been bad stories that they've done. The other bad thing that they've done is they let Bernie Madoff get away with ripping off $50 to $100 billion from investors, despite the fact that other people reported him to the SEC and gave him all the information and told him that this guy was running a Ponzi scheme and that mathematically what he was claiming to do could not possibly work. Okay, and part of the issue was Bernie Madoff was a former bureaucratic head himself of, I believe it was NASDAQ, anyhow, one of the other government or quasi-government agencies. So he was already tied into the big government. He had all these connections. I believe he had relatives working at the SEC. So he's all part of the buddy-buddy crowd. And because of his ties, they just had a hands-off approach to him. And meanwhile, he's ripping off people for tens of billions of dollars. So it's estimated between $50 to $100 billion. So a major debacle from the SEC. And I think it would be great if the SEC really did crack down on real crime, real criminals. They should be doing that. But they don't do that. They let real criminals go away, and then they harass real honest companies just because it's easy picking. So they pick on an honest company that's going down the tubes because they know that they don't have any money to fight back. So I find all of that behavior of the SEC just totally disgusting. And then the fact that half their workers are spending 8 hours a day downloading porn on government computers, not doing their job. I find all of that disgusting as well. So yeah, the SEC is a total failure of an organization, and they really need to be disbanded. Possibly some other way of regulating this securities would be better. I'm sure there's a lot more effective methods that could be utilized these days.
So we know what the SEC does. They go around harassing people that try to tell the truth. Like the SEC were just buffoons, when really they're there to make sure real legitimate business doesn't go on, that everything is consolidated in the hands of the crime syndicate.
I've been writing about the SEC for 35, 40 years and how they protect Wall Street. That's what it's all about. They're not to protect the average investor. These people are as criminal as the people that we have in jails.
Okay, so what was the deal with Michael Reagan, President Reagan's son?
Yeah, okay, so that's a good question. So what happened was early on, when the patch was legal, in the early days, it was a legal patch. The President of the United States at that time was Ronald Reagan. He was in the end of his reign, whatever you call it. You know, his son Michael Reagan was on television daily. I remember seeing it myself, selling another competitive, similar type of diet patch. Now, his was not the one that was invented by Dr. Larry Ford, which I believe was a better one, higher quality, more effective one. But nevertheless, he had another type of diet patch, okay, that he was selling. Okay. Now, so when the president's son is on television, day after day, night after night, night after night, okay, for weeks on end, possibly months, then what does that tell you? Diet patches at that time were legal. Okay. Otherwise, the president's son is not going to be on television promoting it. Okay. So that's the whole point. It was a legal product. Okay. But the lying shills in the press and the lying government agents, all they ever refer to this as an illegal patch. Okay. Half truth equals a big lie. Okay. So yes, it was illegal after they made it illegal, but in the beginning, it was legal. That's why the president's son was selling. That's why News Source was selling. That's why they had 22,000 distributors. That's why everything was moving forward. Okay, so it was a totally contrived debacle and disaster that the inept government created because they took a legal product and they made it legal. Okay, but then the liars in the press, they never point that out. They only refer to it as illegal.
Were there any exaggerated or false claims going on from any of the distributors or anyone else?
Yes, I believe so. Now, I wasn't there, but what happened was, so first of all, from our company on the brokerage side, the order takers, there were no false claims coming from us. We were completely professional, completely accurate. In fact, we tried to talk people out of buying stock. We warned them of the risk. We had them sign off documents indicating that they understood the risk and that their orders were non-solicited. Okay, so we never pushed it. We never even sold it in the traditional sense. So when you, in other words, when you do a non-solicited order, you're really not settling in a specific sense. You're just taking an order. Okay, so it wasn't an actual sale; it was an order taking. And these are points that just like went way over the heads of the SEC and some of their junior attorneys that were new to the business. Okay, now with that said, from what I understand, the News Source distributors in the beginning, when the patch was legal, they were very excited, very hyped up. Okay, and naturally so, you know, because they felt good about getting in on the ground floor of this new distribution company, and everything looked positive. And meetings are growing, and the distributors are growing, and so they're probably, you know, hyping things up. You know, they want to get new people in their downline. That's kind of the whole game in the multi-level business. Now, again, I've never been in the multi-level business myself, but I've known a few people in it, and I've learned a little bit how it works. Their whole game is they want to get people under them in their downline distributors, because the more distributors they have, the bigger their downline is, the more money they're going to make. You see, so in their enthusiasm, maybe over enthusiasm, whatever, they may have gotten hyped up. Okay, they may have exaggerated claims. Okay, it's very typical in multi-level organizations. Okay, and they may have done it all honestly. Who knows? But there's different people. So they may have over-exaggerated. They may have overhyped. They may have blown things out of proportion. Okay, both on the product or maybe even on the investment side. I don't know. I wasn't there. Okay, but I do know that they did have people call me to do orders, and what they said to the people before they called me, I have no idea. maybe they gave them inaccurate information. Maybe, honestly, they gave them information that they thought was the case and it wasn't the case. So it's hard to say. So if any information was inaccurate or faulty or whatever, it definitely would not have come from any people on our side within our company. But any multi-level situation, it's very likely that claims could come in an over-exaggerated, hyped-up manner.
In retrospect, once the FDA changed the rules and actually created a new law overnight, could anything have saved the company? Could management have done anything to save the company after that?
Well, in retrospect, probably not. Probably not. I mean, they tried their best, and it was basically like the Titanic running into an iceberg with a big hole in it. So they're trying to push the water out. They're trying to keep the thing afloat, but it's sinking, it's sinking, it's sinking. Now, on the other hand, they did have a lot of good people. They had a lot of good products. They had other products. It's possible that they could have saved it if the government agencies and the corporatist shills in the press and the other evil sabotagers didn't keep attacking them. Maybe they could have turned it around. Okay. I think the patch product was dead once the government changed the rules on that. But they had a lot of other good products, so possibly they could have saved it. But that's in a theoretical world. That's if they weren't attacked. But when they continue to get attacked, the government comes in and freezes their bank accounts, raids them, steals all of their stuff, prints bad articles, with what they had to go through, there was no possible way, no way.
So were there any similarities to George Orwell's story 1984 in terms of how the government lies, changes the narrative, and makes things up?
Yeah, there really were a lot of similarities because just like in the movie 1984 written by George Orwell, what happens in that movie is the government is constantly changing their narrative and their story all the time. And the people, most of the people, they constantly fall right in line with whatever the government narrative is that day without questioning. Nobody wants to question it. Nobody wants to go against the government narrative. Whatever's in print, they go along with it. So, like in this case, what happened was, in the beginning, there were all these positive stories about the company, stories about mergers and acquisitions and new products, and everything was positive, positive, positive. And then, once the FDA changed the rules and came up with a new law that said that you can't sell the diet patch, the narrative then all of a sudden completely changed. And then all of a sudden, these articles went from very positive to very negative. And then everybody kind of jumped on the bandwagon. And then the narrative was, rather than this new transdermal patch, then the narrative was always, this company has an illegal patch, and they got everybody riled up and emotional. And in the movie 1984 by George Orwell, they had what's called Hate Week, where every so often people would get together and they would all yell out hatred against whoever the current enemy was. I think it was a guy named Goldberg in that movie. But anyhow, they would all yell these hatred things. So in the same sense, the shill press and Big Pharma and corporatists and so forth, they tried to get this hate week thing going with this latest article of whatever the new government narrative is and so forth. And nobody's supposed to question the narrative. And again, in those days, there was no alternative media. There was no YouTube. There was no online stories. There's no way for anybody to get out what the real true story was, you see. And so basically, they just kind of expected everybody to fall right in line with whatever their narrative was, and nobody's supposed to question it. And if you question it, then you're weird or you're part of the enemy or whatever, So anyhow, there certainly were a lot of similarities, and people who love fake news and big government will just go right along with whatever the government narrative happens to be that week.
So a lot of bad stuff happened. But what are you saying was the root cause of the financial troubles?
Well, the root cause, again, was the new law that the FDA suddenly came up with no notice, and that was most probably totally unconstitutional. So that was the root cause, and from there were other causes. After the company was severely weakened, there were other causes. So they had their shill friends in the press write some negative articles that were totally untrue and filled with lies and half-truths. And then they froze bank accounts. Okay, and the hypocrisy of what these people did was they would, on one hand, freeze the company's bank account. Okay, tie up hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, in part of an article they talk about that. And then they turn around and they say, oh, well, this is a bad company because they owe people money. They're not paying their bills. Okay, well, and then nobody even puts two and two together. Hello? How do you pay your bills when they just froze your bank account? Okay, so and then they have stories like, oh, well, Joe over here he's owed $5,000 from the company. He hasn't gotten paid. Well, hello, you just froze the company's bank account. How do you get money? When your bank account's frozen, are you supposed to use carrier pigeons and gold cougarans or something like that? Okay. So at any rate, the point being is that there's so many false narratives and things that are kind of common knowledge and basic to anybody who's there, but a lot of people just can't think through these things. So at any rate, that certainly was a negative thing of what they were doing, attacking this company.
Sure. So why are libertarians against big government, corporatists, and do you think that the government caused most of those problems?
Well, libertarians are against big government and corporatists because they know and understand the type of destruction that these big government and corporatist agencies do. They understand that this is totally against the American entrepreneurial spirit. It's totally against what this country was founded upon, all of the principles of freedom and so forth. And that the deeper game of what's going on is that a lot of this stuff is just a show. It's a smoke screen for what's really happening, and what's really happening is the big corporatist companies use their friends in government agencies to do unfair things, to steamroll small companies, and that hurts private enterprise. That hurts our freedoms. That's completely against the American dream. So they understand that, and they want to do away with that. Now, there are a lot of people that don't like what the libertarians want to do. They don't like their philosophy. And part of the reason is they want to keep getting free stuff. So if the libertarians have their way, a lot of people will not get free stuff. Okay? And they want to keep the government big because they might be tied into a big company, and with libertarian principles, people are only going to get rewarded for what they do, not for what they can manipulate, and not for running small good companies out of business. So libertarians have a lot of really, really good points. Now, I'm not 100% libertarian. I'm actually more of a conservative, but I do agree with many of the libertarian principles. Not every single principle, but many of the principles. They have really good points, and Ron Paul has had a lot of great points, and a lot of he's had a lot of popularity, and he's exposed a lot of the corruption that takes place in this country.
Do you think that people at the SEC were acting brainless? The porn scandal, where they were downloading too much porn during the day and just couldn't think straight or concentrate properly?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that, so for whatever reason, it's a fact, and it's already been exposed, that a lot of people at the SEC were downloading porn all day, up to 8 hours a day on government computers. So that's like not even my claim. That's 100% fact. That's already been brought out in the public. Okay. It's also a fact that they are tied in and favor big Wall Street firms. That's not even my opinion. That's a total fact that's been known for decades. And again, I can't speak for every single SEC person because I don't know every single SEC person. But I have met with a few, and I've also talked to a few, and I would say that the ones that I've talked to really showed me completely. They showed me that they were pretty much completely brainless.
Was the news source raid illegal and unconstitutional?
Yes, absolutely. That was an illegal, unconstitutional raid. They came in with no notice whatsoever, 2 big trucks, and they literally stole. And I say stole because they took it without permission. They didn't pay for this stuff. They just took it. Now, if you or I were to pull up a truck and go into a company's business and go in at gunpoint, and I'm totally dead serious. They had agents with guns, pointing guns at people. Okay, if you point guns at people and you start taking their computers and their file cabinets and checks and all kinds of stuff, that's called robbery. Okay, that's stealing. That's theft. No two ways about it. There was no asking. It was stealing. Okay, they stole 20,000 pounds worth of computers, file cabinets, documents. Checks, anything they could get their hands on. Okay, that's the way the SS the SS and Nazis used to do things in Germany back in the 1930s and 1940s. Okay, they just pull out their guns and they just take whatever they want to take. Okay, now. They may say, oh, well, but we got some, we got a warrant or we got some judge's permission, blah, blah, blah. But that would have all been based on lies or false data or rumor. Okay, and the proof is this. Okay, here's the proof is this. They made a big deal about it, and they even had some articles printed about them taking all of this stuff. Okay, and so, oh, well, there might be some evidence of somebody may have done something wrong. Okay, well, if you're going to do that, you're going to steal 20,000 pounds of stuff, okay, and you say somebody might have done something wrong, well then, guess what? You better come out pretty quickly and show, here's the smoking gun, here's the document, here's what we found, here's the contraband, here's the drugs. But you know what? Years and years went by. They never showed any drugs. Well, there was never any claim of any drugs to begin with. They never showed any false documents. They never showed any illegal documents. They never showed any contraband. They never came up with nothing. Okay? If you're going to go in and steal 20,000 pounds worth of stuff from a company, file cabinets, computers, okay, you better come up quickly and show, what it is that you got. What did you get? But they never got anything. Nothing. Nothing was ever shown. Nothing was ever written about. Nothing was ever disclosed to the public. Okay, so that is a total theft.
So yesterday, there was a big raid conducted in L.A., and this raid hit 3 people, the businesses in their homes, and one was James Stewart, the founder of Rawsome Foods, a private buying club, a buyer's club that sells raw food and raw milk and raw cheese to its members. I'll describe what happened in the raid, but it was a SWAT-style raid, guns, helmets, like military-style helmets, bulletproof vests, multiple vehicles, multiple agencies from the FDA, the CDC, the California, the LA County Department of Agriculture, the LA County Sheriff's Office, and LAPD were all on the scene to be part of this raid.
Were they a threat to anybody? I mean, honestly, were these people, raw and armed to the hilt? I mean, what brought this on?
Armed with microbes, maybe. I mean, they had probiotics in their milk.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think maybe the government has lost its mind and now considers those to be weapons of mass destruction. Robert, I gotta just lay it out here. This is an act of government-sponsored terrorism against innocent people. We have now reached a point in America where the terrorists are the government. I mean, it's become that bad that these people were doing. And I haven't even told you the whole story yet. There's 2 other people that were arrested. Sherrod Palmer, who is the owner of Healthy Family Farms that sells some of the milk to the Rawsome Foods Buying Club, and also Victoria Block, who is the LA County liaison for the Weston Price Foundation. These 3 people, their homes were raided, their cash was stolen from them, the Rawsome Foods inventory was destroyed by these crooks with badges, and they're charging all 3 of these people with conspiracy.
Conspiracy to what? To mislabel cheese? That's what I heard a little bit, that they've said, oh, well, the reason is that they mislabeled the cheese.
Exactly, yeah. One of the charges against Sharon is that she mislabeled cheese.
It's slightly analogous to what happened with the Iraq War situation. Okay, so what happened was there, the Bush administration went into Iraq, and because they said, okay, well, we think maybe they have chemical weapons, even though all of the UN inspectors said there are no chemical weapons. We can't find any chemical weapons, but supposedly they had some inside data that said, no, well, we think really they're there, even though we can't find them. So they went in, took over the whole country, and guess what? They never found any weapons of mass destruction. Okay, and the problem is that actually destabilized the country, unleashed ISIS, unleashed all kinds of stuff, cost the country trillions of dollars, and now we're in this ongoing mess where we have to now continue to send money and troops into Iraq and Afghanistan, and the nightmare just goes on and on. Okay, so it's a similar, not an exact analogy, but it's a pretty close analogy. So they sent in something like 40 agents with guns, and these are all just like nice, harmless people. There was a men in their 60s, and they're just sitting there as clerks, typing away, just doing, whatever they're doing, bookkeeping, office work, harmless people, not hurting a fly. And all of a sudden 40 agents come in with guns and start stealing all their stuff, okay? So point being is that if you're a government agency and you're like raiding companies, you better come up with some evidence after the raid, or you better apologize. But an apology is not even going to cut it, because that right there probably did millions of dollars worth of damage. And who did you steal from? Who did they steal from? It wasn't just the companies. They stole from the investors, okay? Because that was a public company, so people owned shares in that, and the investors, that was all part of they owned part of those computers, part of those file cabinets, part of those documents, those checks, whatever, and they all had hope at that point that maybe the company would turn themselves around, even though it was already getting pretty difficult. So to steal from the company, a public company, rip them off, put the knife in their heart, that was the final death blow, okay? And then to have the nerve and the utter gall to say, oh, look, we did something good, okay, and it was the company that was bad. No, you guys who did that raid, you people at the SEC, the FDA, whatever other agencies coordinated that, that was a total Nazi move by doing that kind of thing. And Also, this is not an isolated incident. This kind of thing does happen all the time to probably dozens or hundreds of companies that they just go in and raid the companies. Now, again, if somebody, the way I look at it is this: if you have proof that a company is a really bad company doing something wrong, maybe they're manufacturing weapons or bombs or drugs, heroin, whatever it may be. Okay, you get solid proof, evidence. Yeah, then I would say, okay, I'd probably be for that kind of raid. You know, if you know for sure, okay, that some company is doing something really bad for society, something illegal. Okay, but if all you got is just some, you know, nonsensical rumors, oh, I think maybe something could be happening, or I'm a little upset because I invested some stock and now because of the FDA changed the rules and now my stock is down and I can't sell it at the moment, blah, 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 so I say go raid him. That's total bogus, okay? That again, that's evil, Nazi-like behavior. You know, you got nothing and you destroyed the company. So the joke of the matter is that then the SEC is supposedly investigating what happened, why the investment went down, why everything crashed. Well, here's the joke: is that what they need to do is to investigate themselves because they're actually the culprits. They're the criminals. They're the ones that hurt the company. They're the ones that halted the trading. They're the ones that coordinated the raid. They're the ones that coordinated a lot of the bad press. Okay, same with the FDA. They needed to be investigated themselves because they were the ones that hurt the company. The brokers or the order takers, they didn't hurt the company. They were hoping the company was going to succeed. The corporate CEOs, the managers of the company, the guys that were like ex-pastors working at the company, they didn't hurt the company. They were trying to help the company. They were trying to hope that things would succeed. The managers, the Fred Lembergs, the Leo McGowans, they weren't hurting the company. They were hoping things were going to succeed. Now, does that mean every single person at the company was a perfect angel? No, I don't think there's any company anywhere on the planet where every single person is an angel. But for the most part, they were good companies. They had a lot of good people. They had good products. They had doctors behind it, scientists behind this stuff, and this is a total classic case of incompetency, government corruption, big business corruption, just steamrolling over a little company that's trying to do the right thing. And it's what they did was totally despicable, and they are all those agencies and regulators and big business people. They're 100% responsible for all of the damage that they caused.
Was the damage already done once the FDA changed the rules on everyone?
Yeah, so again, pretty much once they changed the rules, which I think was illegal and unconstitutional, I mean, to come up with just out of thin air, you got one guy at the FDA who's tied into big business, big pharma companies, without an act of Congress, without a legislation, nobody votes on it, just one guy who's corrupt and tied into big pharma, to just say, okay, your product is now illegal. You can't sell those $3 million worth of batch products. To me, that's total corruption. Okay, I mean, this potentially could have been $1 billion company. Who knows? Okay, so you potentially wiped out a $1 billion. Could have even been a multi-billion-dollar company. It's hard to say. Yeah, but who knows? Maybe the company would have died on their own anyhow. But that's not a decision that they should have made. Okay. So for just one guy to be able to come up with a rule out of thin air and kill off a company, in my opinion, that was unconstitutional, illegal, unethical, and that was totally wrong. And then to make matters worse, they continued to lie about it in the press for months and then have some sort of bogus cover-up where they now pretend, okay, now we're going to investigate what happened. When no, we already know what happened. You guys screwed everything up with your new rules. Okay, that's the investigation right there. And then you guys kept attacking the company, and you made everything worse. And now you're playing some sort of game like, well, we're trying to find the criminals here. Well, guess what? Here's where the criminals were. pull up a mirror. That's where the criminals are.
Why wouldn't the SEC answer any of your questions? You think they were afraid of something?
Yeah, well, some of my questions were designed to show their hypocrisy, but I was giving them a chance to show if there's an answer. Okay, well, answer the question. Okay, but they wouldn't answer the questions, and they had no answers. And it was also to show their incompetence. It was to show the fact that they were also partly being shills for big business, big corporatist America. But then there was so it was partly trying to call them on the carpet and expose their corruption. But it was also honest questions, meaning, okay, hey, if there's something I'm overlooking, let me know. I mean, hey, I was a pretty smart guy then. I mean, I had 3 major securities licenses. I was a senior chess master. I had multiple chess championships. I had a college degree. I'd been to law school for a little bit. I was a high school graduate at age 15. Won multiple awards and so forth. So I wasn't the smartest guy in the country, but wasn't the dumbest either. So these were the legitimate questions, and my whole point was that, hey, if there's something I'm overlooking, let me know. I'm into the truth. I have a degree in philosophy, so I try to do the right thing. I try to do the logical thing. I try to do the correct thing. But we're all human. Occasionally I overlook something. So I'm saying, hey, if I'm overlooking something, let me know what it is. But all they can say is, we don't know. I don't know. I can't answer your question. I can't talk about that.
Could the FDA have been more orderly and intelligent in their rulings?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, the FDA, in my opinion, never should have come up with a ruling the way that they did overnight with no notice. Okay. So first of all, the patch products were legal for years. Okay. So now, maybe they should have been made illegal several years before. I don't know. That's a technical question. Okay. But they were legal for years. Transdermal products were on the market for many years. Okay. And the way they did it was totally wrong. They waited until this company had millions of dollars worth of orders, millions of dollars worth of product in the warehouse ready to ship. Maybe tens of millions of dollars in incalculable energy in terms of 22,000 distributors that are ready to go out and start selling lots of this product. So all kinds of positive momentum. Okay. And to just overnight, at the peak of everything, to create a new law that nobody voted on and it just kills the company, that was totally wrong. So in my opinion, they should have, if they didn't like the patch products, and they've already been on the market, they should have made a ruling years before this even happened. Okay. Now, if they dropped the ball on that level, okay, and they didn't make that ruling, and now let's say they're at a point where, okay, hey, we haven't been thinking about this for a long time, so now we're happen to be thinking about it legitimately. Yeah, I don't know, maybe patch products shouldn't be selling. Then what they should do is do it in a more kinder manner, a more logical manner, a more efficient manner. Send a notice that, hey, we're going to be considering, we may put restrictions on these products in 6 months or in 12 months or some time frame. These are under review. Send some notice. Okay. That way, a company that's got already invested millions of dollars into it, they can then do some orderly unwindings. Okay. They can maybe sell off their inventory in an orderly basis. They can maybe then restructure, try to move into a different direction, move into different products. They can have time to alert their distributors or their investors, whatever, and say, okay, hey, it looks like these products may have some issues, or they can say, okay, here's an application. Why don't you send in your application and try to get this approved? And then they can say, okay, hey, well, we're running this through the process or whatever. Okay, so there's a number of ways that they could have been much, much better and more effective in the way that they handle things. But they completely handle things in a totally wrong, Nazi-like fashion. I mean, with no notice. At the peak of the company's distribution, they just issue a ruling and just say, no, it's illegal, you can't sell it, boom, that's it. You got to throw it all away. Okay, that's totally wrong. That's not the American way. That's not the kind of way to do it. And that makes no logical sense why they would do it. The only reason that they would even do something like that that makes any logical sense to me is what was explained to me, that there was some corruption, some dirty dealing, that some of their friends in Big Pharma wanted the product illegal so they could later capture the market themselves. Okay, and so it has all of the writings that they did it in a way to purposely, run the company out of business. So yeah, it was totally bungled, totally mishandled from my perspective. But maybe, from their perspective, they did something really dirty, really corrupt, and they achieved what they wanted to achieve. They actually, they hurt a lot of people, ruined a lot of people's lives, but in the end they got what they wanted. They ran the company out of business. Their friends ended up selling the very same product a year later, and they all made a fortune.
Who was Dr. Larry Ford?
So yeah, very good question. Now, Dr. Larry Ford was one of the top research doctors in the country at that time. He was a researcher at UCLA University, and he actually was the inventor of the LaPatch transdermal product. Okay, and I had actually seen him several times. He'd gone to many meetings and spoke many times, and he was a very well-respected doctor in his field of research, one of the top doctors in the country. And he was the inventor of the patch. Okay, now, speaking of him, so one of the big lies that the lying press, dirty rats, kept doing, okay, which I'm sure they were put up to it by their corporate shills, is whenever they would refer to the LaPatch product, they would always leave out Dr. Larry Ford's name. And they would always say, oh, it's a bogus patch, and it was dreamed up by some guy at the company, okay? And, or it was invented by the CEO just came up with this idea, on the fly, okay? And that was such a big lie, okay? That it was invented by Dr. Larry Ford, okay? That was in all of the literature. Everybody knew that. Dr. Ford took credit for it, okay? And he was a top well-respected doctor. Nobody ever said anything bad about him. But again, they always, in their half-truths and their lying articles, they would always say, oh, this guy came up with a fraudulent, bogus product. There's no such thing. Transdermal technology is impossible. It couldn't work. It's a ridiculous product. Okay. So again, more lies. They leave out pertinent details, pertinent facts.
Did you ever see any scams?
No, not at the company. I never saw any scams. I never saw any conspiracies. I never saw any collusion. I never saw anybody who was, dishonest or trying to rip anybody off or anything. Now, I did see some big scams, and that was the scams that were coordinated between the FDA and the SEC. Those were the real scam artists. And in my opinion, that was the scam, was to run the company out of business and then to try to do a cover-up and act like you're investigating something when you should actually be investigating yourselves, because you guys were the ones who ruined everything. Okay, so that was the scam. It was to hurt the company, protect your big corporatist friends, and then disseminate false information and act like the company is at fault, and then you don't point out that Dr. Larry Ford was the inventor of the LaPatch, and then you even mentioned you talked about the protected products, which were an antiviral, antibacterial product, and was shown to kill the AIDS virus in laboratories through double-blind studies. And then rather than mention any of those details, you don't bring up Dr. Kamal Assam. Then all you guys do is you just say, this guy, the CEO, he dreamed up this this AIDS product. Yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, well, right. So the CEO is running the business. He wasn't the scientist. He wasn't inventing these things. And you try to whitewash it and act like it's just something somebody dreamed up on the fly. You say, so again, all of this dissemination of faulty information. This is all very similar to the George Orwell 1984 movie, where they just keep changing the facts. The government makes up lies, whatever they want, and then everybody just falls along. And again, at that time, most people, they just believe whatever they read because it's in print, and they don't have time to dissect this, and are not able to think through the corruption. They're not able to think through the real scandal, which was the the government agencies and the big corporatist companies and so forth. And so yeah, that was the real scam that was going on, was to steamroll the company, run them out of business, and then try to fool everybody into believing that you're somehow you agencies are somehow the good guys, that you're coming in to save everybody, when you saved nobody. All you did was burn everything down. You're kind of like basically you'd be equivalent. You guys were equivalent to like a fireman that comes into somebody's house because their stove has a little extra big fire on it, and you say, here, let me help you, and you start pouring gasoline all over the place and burn the house down. And you say, great, hey, I really helped you out. I burned everything down.
Well, what about the reported $8 million scam?
Oh, that's another beauty that the press did. Okay, so the press would, what they did was, first off, there were about 40 different divisions, company divisions within roughly 7 different public companies within this group or association. Okay, so what they did was they did some sort of capitalization. They crunched some numbers and some sort of capitalization numbers, and they found out, they basically calculated somehow, I don't know how they did, but that within these 40 companies and 7 public companies and blah blah blah, over multiple years, that their overall capitalization was like $8 million that had gone through the company's expense accounts or whatever. Okay, now then what they did is then they would then have their friends in the press write these articles and say, oh, this was an $8 million scam. There was $8 million involved. Okay, and get rid of it, try to get people riled up. Oh my gosh, it was an $8 million scam. Okay, now, that's totally misleading, and anybody who has half a brain understands that when you were talking 7 public companies, 40 divisions, and this was like, I don't know, over 3 or 4 or 5 years or whatever, $8 million is a small, tiny amount, okay, of overall revenue capital, okay, over a 3 or 4 or 5 year period for 40 companies, okay. So if anything, the company, from what I saw, was usually undercapitalized, okay. Basically, if you just crunch the numbers, let's say it was over a 3 or 4 year period. Let's say it's a 4 year period. If you take $8 million divided by 4, that's $2 million. Okay, $2 million in expenses divided by 40 companies is not a lot of money. Okay, that means that those companies are barely subsisting and surviving. Okay, so just to put it another way, $8 million, okay, would be a low salary for one CEO for 1 year of a pharmaceutical company. Okay, sometimes these guys are getting 15, 20 million for 1 year. Okay, but they're saying, oh, $8 million is a lot of money to spread out over 40 companies over a 4 year period. That's just absolute nonsense. Okay, $8 million is also, would be a low salary for 1 year for a good baseball player or a good football player or a good basketball player. Okay, some of these guys, they make 10, 15, 20 billion a year. Okay, so the point being is that they're trying to say that 8 million, or some people would say it was 10 million or 11 million. Oh, there was an $8 million scam, or was it $11 million scam? Total lie, total nonsense. Okay, so first off, it wasn't a scam. The scam was what the big business, big pharma, corporatist agencies, and the government agencies were all doing to run them out of business. That was the only scam that I saw. When you start, you start calculating, okay, what is your rent on your office building? What are the employees getting paid? The employees are not. I've never heard of employees that will show up to companies for free. Okay, what are your production costs? What are your supply costs? That's a small amount. Okay, that's a small amount. Okay, so the press, if they were fair, they would have pointed these things out, and the real bottom line is that they were undercapitalized. Okay, but they're pointing this. They're talking about this as though, oh, it was like this huge amount of money. Okay, it wasn't a huge amount of money for 7 public companies and 40 divisions. They actually were way underfunded, way undercapitalized. But nobody in that situation could have survived with all of the attacks. So they made a valiant attempt, and we were hoping that they would save it because we wanted our investors to make money. We had investments. We wanted to make money. If our investors make money, we make money. It's a win-win situation. So we didn't want to see the ship go down without a fight. So they fought on, and we were keeping our fingers crossed. But they continued to get harassed. And what the government did to them was totally rotten and evil and disgusting. What the big corporations did to them was totally rotten and evil and disgusting. They basically stole the company. They stole 20,000 pounds worth of documents and computers and other stuff, and then after they went out of business, then they stole their products, sold the same products, and said, oh, now they're great, wonderful products. So according to the press, oh, they were horrible, bogus products when the small company has it, but now that the small company's out of business and the big company has it, oh, these are the best products we've ever seen in our lives.
Are you saying that everyone who worked for the company and all the managers were all angels and never did anything wrong?
Good question. And no, I'm not saying that at all. And what I'm saying is this. The press likes to focus in. They like to focus in just on one guy. So one of the guys at the top, he did have a kind of a long battle with the SEC and possibly other government agencies, and apparently he beat them in some case, and they were upset and they wanted to get vengeance or whatever. And so that guy, he was like an accountant for Arthur Andersen many years and CEO of other companies and whatever. And he may have had a slightly checkered past, and people like to focus in on him. And I think that for me and my brother and other people, we all believe that his intentions were good. He tried to make a go of it, and he wanted obviously he wanted the company to succeed. He doesn't benefit if the company goes down. I mean, that's absurd. That's retarded thinking, to think that he wanted to sabotage his own company. You'd have to be a crazy person to think that. So no, he wanted it to succeed. But there were many other people associated with the company other than Dave Stearns. So in fact, there were probably a dozen or so CEOs, and there's like 40 divisions. There's maybe 40 company managers, and then there's hundreds of regular employees and thousands of distributors. So the company is more than just one person. Okay, so let's take the number 2 person. So the number 2 person at the company, his name was Verl Stearns. Okay, and Verl Stearns was a missionary in Africa for 30 years. 30 years. And then he came back to the United States, and he was a pastor for several years. And Verl Stearns was a really good guy, really honest, sweet man. And he also went to the same church as my Aunt Edith. And my Aunt Edith was a really good, sweet, kind-hearted person, very honest, good integrity. A lot of people thought she was really fanatical, which may have been, but for sure she was very honest and had a lot of integrity, and she would not be going to a church and being associated with people who are scam artists or rip-offs. Okay, so the fact of the matter is Aunt Edith was very honest. Burl Stearns, who went to her same church and who was a missionary for 30 years and who was a pastor, he was very honest. That's the number 2 guy in the company. So the lying press would have you believe that Burl was a missionary for 30 years, he was a pastor for several years, and all of a sudden, overnight, he decided to turn into a scam artist. Okay? That story just doesn't even make any sense. It doesn't hold any water. Okay? And then when you go past Burl Stearns, there were other high integrity people. Fred Lemberg was a really good, honest person. Leo McGowan was a good, honest person. There was company manager after company manager that they were all really capable people, honest people, high integrity people, hundreds of other good quality people. Okay, so to just focus in on one guy and say, well, this one guy, we don't like him, and so therefore we're going to say all hundreds of people are all bad and evil because there's one guy that we don't like. And again, even that one guy, he had intentions to make the company work, to make the company successful. And again, it gets away from what the main issue. The main issue was that it was a good company, it was prospering, they were making money, everybody was making money, and the FDA changed the rules of the game, and then the SEC came in and harassed everybody, and then they stole all their stuff. Okay, so so the reality is that was everybody perfect in the company? No, probably not. But I'd say for the most part, most of them were good, honest, decent people that wanted this company to be successful. And you could look at any company in America, and if you look at everybody with a magnifying glass, you're going to find that not every single person is a perfect angel of a human being at every single company.
So who is responsible for killing the company?
So the people who are really responsible are not the company officials. Okay, it's not the Stearns, it's not the order takers, it's not the brokers, it's not Fred Lemberg, it's not Leo McGowan, it's not the news source distributors. The responsibility for killing the company can only go to number one the FDA. They're the primary culprits in this whole thing because they changed the rules and pulled the rug out from everybody. Okay. Secondly, I would say the SEC. The SEC did a lot of dirty tactics. They halted trading and they prevented people from selling off what was rightfully their investments. Okay, and played a lot of games favoring Wall Street companies over the small companies. Beyond that, I'm sure there were other other regulation agencies that kind of jumped in the act because a lot of them, they all share information, they all join in together and so forth. But I would say, to break it down succinctly, who's responsible for killing the company, I would say it's a combination of Big Pharma, corporatist companies, and big government. That's who killed the company. The company officials did not kill the company. They actually fought valiantly in order to try to save the company. They didn't kill their own company. I mean, nobody profits by killing their own company. So yeah, it was basically the regulation agencies combined with Big Pharma and other corporatist interests. Oh, also the lying shills in the press that wrote these horrible articles attacking the company, where they would lie about things and present their half-truths and continue to only refer to an illegal diet patch, not pointing out that it was a legal patch, and only focus in on some negatives and over-exaggerating the negatives and not pointing out any of the positives. So I would say that those people are responsible.
Did the fake news articles ever point out that the patch was initially a legal patch and then became an illegal one by virtue of a new rule?
No, they did not, and that was what was disgusting about them, because that was very dastardly, devilish reporting on their part. Because when you when you do an article, you need to be accurate and point out all the facts, and they never did that. So it was a totally evil slanted article, because they're only saying, oh, this was an illegal patch, and that gives the impression and the implication that it was illegal the whole time, and it was not. That's why the president's son, Michael Reagan, was selling a legal diet patch on television day in and day out for weeks, and eventually he stopped once they changed the rules and made it an illegal patch. So, yeah, so basically, the press were complete shills for the big pharma corporatist companies, and were complete liars and totally inaccurate in the reporting. And again, I have no problem at all. If the press wants to report a negative fact, go ahead and report it. But you've got to be honest. You've got to report the positives also. You know, to any situation, life's made up of positives and negatives. You got to point out the positives and the negatives. And you got to also remember that, you know, to every story, there's another side. So there's two sides to every story. And so all they're doing is they're only pointing out the negatives, they're exaggerating those negatives, they're lying about those negatives, and then they're not reporting on the other side of the story. So thank goodness we have places like YouTube these days where people can now get out the other side of the story.
Do you think that the SEC and the FDA should have been investigating themselves?
Yeah. Well, in a perfect world, yes. Although in a practical world, that will never happen, because the joke of the whole thing is that the SEC is acting like these pious people that they're like, oh, hey, there's a problem here. This stock is now worthless, and we want to find out why it's worthless or why it's not trading. But they're the ones in combination with the FDA that made the stock worthless in the first place. If they didn't exist, everything would have been fine. Everything would have been just happy and so forth. Okay, so they are the ones who did the damage. The SEC, and again, the SEC has done this kind of damage to hundreds of companies. Not only this company. This is common modus operandus for the SEC. They love to ruin companies for little guys, because they get brownie points, and they know that the little guys can't fight back. Before this, I would say, I was ignorant of it. I trusted governments and agencies, and I trusted the SEC and the FDA. But after this, I saw that they're all a bunch of lying thieves. Okay, so it opened my eyes. Now, and again, I'm not saying every one of them, because obviously these are big organizations. There's lots of people that work for them, but many people at the top, let's say, are just lying thieves, and many people in the press are lying, disgusting shills. I mean, the press people, they've helped to start wars. They helped to expand the Vietnam War by reporting things like the United States had ships attacked at the Gulf of Tonkin and whatnot, and that was a lie from the government. And that was then propagated by the press at the time, and therefore we sent lots of troops to Vietnam to die. 53,000 American troops died in Vietnam, partly based on initial lies that were promoted by the lying press, the same kind of lying press that lied about the news source situation. So yeah, it opened up my eyes. And I wish and pray that other people would open up their eyes and realize that you cannot believe everything that you read in the press. You can't believe everything CNN tells you. You can't believe everything MSNBC tells you, because it's a lot of it is fake news, a lot of it's big lies, and a lot of it is spun. It's spun, meaning there are some elements of truth, it's half-truths, but it's spun in a way that it just becomes a big lie. So yeah, but was I fulfilled? Yeah, no, it was extremely unfulfilling. And then, like 2.5 years after the company died, 2.5 years after I was totally out of the business, then the SEC is still trying to justify their own evil actions by the raid that they did and shutting down the company stock and so forth. So then they come back and harass people, 2.5 years later, try to get them to sign off on it, some documents so that the SEC can save face and so that they don't get sued or in trouble, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it shows kind of like, the whole thing showed a real ugly side of what can happen with, big business, big pharma, corporate America, big government agencies. And there's a whole tie-in to today, and today, now this whole episode was a long time ago, it's long past. But today, now you have even worse situations. Here they were destroying a company, and they totally destroyed it. They get all the blame and the credit for destroying this company. But now, big government is trying to destroy this country. They have destroyed most of Europe. Europe it's sad, it's doomed. Thank God I got a chance to go to Europe a couple of times and visit before it got totally destroyed. But now they're just totally destroying Europe. They're destroying England. They're destroying Sweden. They're destroying Germany. All of this big government nonsense is going on, and they're trying to destroy the United States. And I don't know if they're going to succeed or not. I hope they don't. They're slowed down a little bit, but they're going to keep trying. And the only thing we can do is we have to get out there and speak the truth. Now, with that said, a lot of people who love big pharma and who love big government and who love Big Brother, from George Orwell's 1984. A lot of people who believe everything in print are going to hate everything that I've said. They're going to say I'm the liar and I'm crazy and so forth. And that's fine. In this country they can believe whatever they want to believe. But they can believe whatever they want, but I still have to speak the truth. So the best thing we can do to stop the takeover from big government is we got to get out there and we have to speak the truth, because that can slow things down, and that may give us an ultimate victory in this battle. But we cannot just roll over and let big government just take over and sell out our country, which they are trying to do, and they're slowly trying to do, and they'll keep trying to do it.
Why do they call Stearns the penny stock king?
Oh, right. So that was another joke that I saw in one of those old newspaper articles that they had. They called him the penny stock king, and these people are total crazy lunatics. Okay, so first of all, and again, that is fake news designed to confuse the minds of people who are ignorant in these matters and don't know anything about how business works, don't know anything about the stock market, don't know anything about penny stocks. Okay, and again, it's more evil lies that they're putting out. So first of all, they claim that Stearns was involved over 5 years with multiple companies, and in total they say somewhere between 8 million to 11 million was total assets that people invested and so on. Okay, so and a lot of these companies, they went public via merger, and they sold their stock, which any stock that's below, say, like a $2 stock is considered a penny stock. Okay. But the thing was, if you break it down, anybody who has any knowledge whatsoever, and you say, okay, this person was involved with $8 million of penny stocks or over-the-counter stocks over a 5-year period, that's a low number. That's like nothing. Okay, big brokerage firms, they regularly will raise 10, 20, $50 million for one company in 1 year. Okay, some companies they raise $100 million for. Okay, There are big investment banking firms that raise lots of money for over-the-counter companies through the way of penny stocks, and they might do $50 million in penny stocks in 1 year, $100 million, $200 million. Okay, so so to call anybody who understands the stock market, to call this guy the penny stock king when they're claiming that his total the total amount of money invested in his companies was $8 million over a 4 or 5 year period, that's just flat out wrong. That's not a king. That's a low level or maybe a medium low level financier. That's not the king. That's just all spin. That's all lies. What they were trying to do is very destructive. So first off, they're trying to take a group of companies that has hundreds of employees, and they're trying to only focus in on one guy when there were lots of other people involved in the company. He was just one person. But then they were trying to demonize him and say, oh, he's the penny stock king. Okay, so meaning he's almost like he's Dr. Evil, and we must stop Dr. Evil because otherwise he's going to turn the whole country into a big penny stock farm, and so forth. So, and again, so for somebody who doesn't understand the stock market, doesn't understand how business works, they look at that and they go, oh, that's scary. I better lock my doors because otherwise the penny stock king is going to come try to eat us tonight, and so forth. So basically, total nonsense, and again, you're talking $8 million for 40 companies over a 5 year period, but yet they have no problem with a big pharma CEO making $10 or $20 million per year every single year. Okay, so that they got, oh, that's all normal, that's no big deal. But some guy who's the head of a group of 40 companies that their total capitalization was $8 million in a 5 year period. Oh my gosh, that number's too big. That's way too big. That's got to be spread out between hundreds of people. But one guy who gets $10 million or a $20 million salary year after year, oh, that's fine. He deserves it.
Why do they call Stearns the mastermind?
Oh, right, yeah. So that's another funny, laughable thing that they did in these fake news shill articles. So they would print this towards the end, and so first off, so I was around there several times and knew several of these people and was in and out and doing my own thing or whatever. But never once did I ever hear anybody call him the mastermind. Okay, and so when I read that in some article, one of these fake news shills were writing, I thought, oh gosh, what a joke. So basically, what they're trying to do, again, was to demonize him by calling him, ooh, the mastermind. So you have these scary pictures of some cartoon character who's out to master everybody's mind and he's going to take over the world and so forth. So, and what that does is, again, it's more fake news, it's more mission. They're not pointing out that the number 2 guy at the company, Earl Stearns, was a missionary for 30 years. He was a pastor for several years. He did go to the same church as my Aunt Edith for several years, and Aunt Edith was a very honest, religious person, and Earl Stearns was a very honest person. And there were dozens and dozens of other people that were good, honest people, good quality people. But it's easy to talk, just focus in on one guy, and so they want to take the focus away from all of these other good, nice, honest people. And since Stearns was the one who 9 years before he declared bankruptcy, and he had a few battles with regulatory agencies and so forth, that he was an easy target to pick on, and so it just really demonizes him, I believe, in the public's mind. It's like, ooh, the mastermind, watch out, he's going to come and he's going to take over your mind, and you're going to be finished and so forth. So yeah, it's just more lies and corruption by the press.
In the end, did the government do any emotional blackmail against Stearns and his daughter, Deborah?
Yeah. So what I read, and again, I was totally out of the scene for a long time by that time. But what I read in the papers was apparently the regulators were going after Stearns, threatening to sue or prosecute Stearns or to indict him or whatever, and Stearns was fighting them and battling with them the whole time, and said no, he hasn't done anything wrong. He's trying to do the right thing and so forth. And they were attacking him, and so anyhow, and he was defending himself, and the battle was going back and forth. But eventually, apparently, from what I read in the articles, they found a way to get at him, and so apparently he actually was a good family man. He was close to his family, and he had his daughter. He had a couple of beautiful daughters, and he was close to them. And so at one point, he put one of his daughters in a management position at the company, and so what the government did was they found a way to get to Stearns, and they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go after your daughter. We're going to try to prosecute your daughter and put her in jail because she was in some sort of management capacity at one of the companies, unless you sign off and agree that you're guilty to some charge. Okay. And I don't know, trumped up charge or whatever. I have no idea because again I wasn't out on that level. From what I heard, apparently the daughter was really emotional, broke up and crying and really upset. She got put in that position, and Stearns felt guilty. He loved his daughter. He didn't want to see his daughter suffer. And so, in my mind, and not only my mind, but a lot of people's mind, that's what's called emotional blackmail. And it's almost like, in other words, unless you cop to this plea, we're going to go after your daughter, we're going to ruin her life, we're going to stick her in jail, and we're going to mess her up. Unless you sign this and agree to some sort of weird trumped up charges or whatever. Okay. So it's almost no different from like a terrorist coming at somebody and saying, okay, we're going to kill your kid unless you surrender. Okay. Now, if you're a good family man and you love your kid, a lot of people are just going to surrender. They're going to say, okay, take me, but let my kid go. And so, you can draw whatever conclusions you want from that, but on one level, you could argue, well, maybe Stearns is guilty or something because otherwise he wouldn't have signed off on this. But you could also argue that maybe he loved his daughter and he didn't want to see his daughter go down, so he just said, okay, yeah, whatever, I want this to end, and so Harold, sign whatever you want, and so forth. So that's kind of what happened. So I think you can make a pretty good case for the fact that was emotional blackmail by the government, and that's pretty dirty pool. Because look, the way I look at it is this: if there was something Stearns did wrong, if he committed some crime, by all means go after him, prosecute him, but don't be so low class and so maggot-like and disgusting to bring his daughter into it and say, well, we're going to go harass your daughter, we're going to stick your daughter in jail unless you agree to whatever we want. That's really low life in my opinion. No class.
Are you in any way against the government or anti-government at all?
No, not at all. I'm actually a supporter of the government. I'm very pro-government. I think government is needed. I'm not an anarchist. But I would like to see government the way that it used to be. I'd like to see government go back to the way that it was when this country was founded. This country was founded on the principles of liberty and freedom for all. And, we had a revolution in this country in 1776 because of taxation being too high. We had taxation without representation, and we didn't like to be controlled by England at that point, so we threw off the government. And from the year 1776 to the year 1913, this government was very limited, but the country was very free, and the country was thriving. It was booming. It was doing real well. We weren't a global power. We weren't getting into other people's businesses. We weren't the world's policemen. But then after that, something happened. So somewhere around 1913, they created the IRS, and there's a big debate about that. So the IRS was created, and that started permeating into everybody's lives, and now all of a sudden people lost their freedom, because now the government taxes everything you make, and the taxes were growing and growing, and then they want to know everything you do, and they want to control everything you do, and blah, blah, blah. And then after that, then they created the Federal Reserve Department, and then, oh gosh, they created the Social Security Department, which is basically a big Ponzi scam, because in the Social Security, there is no money in Social Security. And when I was a kid, they sold it to us like, oh, get a job, put all your money in Social Security, and eventually the money will be there for when you retire. Well, guess what? That was all a big lie. There is no money there, and it only relies on new people coming into the system. That's the definition of a Ponzi scheme. So there is no money with Social Security, but they need new workers to pay into it so that the old workers can get paid up. So anyway, so the whole point is this, is that I'm totally for government. I think government's a great thing. I think some government agencies are good, but you want to keep it down to the bare bones minimum. Okay, when they get too big, they get too powerful, they get too corrupt. They ruin people's lives. You see? They ruin people's freedoms. They start favoring big business, and the reason is because the big business people are able to bribe their friends in the government, and so they hurt little businesses, and so forth. So yeah, I'm all for the government. I'm not an anarchist, but I want to keep it down to a bare bones minimum, and I don't like the government running over people's lives with too much crazy regulation and forcing things on people that they don't want and that they did not vote for.
What was the faith-saving consent decrees that they entered into, as one attorney said?
Right. Okay, so one of the attorneys was quoted in the newspaper as saying what the government does, and this is kind of a trick that they do, is they, when they don't have any evidence on anything and they can't prove their case, okay, what they do is they offer what's called a consent decree. And so what that is as the attorney had explained, that's a face-saving mechanism by the government. So meaning, it's kind of like a way, in a roundabout way to use a chess analogy, it's like offering a draw in a sense. So what they basically say is, okay, we want you to sign this document, and if you sign this document, you're basically saying that you don't admit to anything that we're saying, but you also don't deny anything we're saying. So it's kind of a draw. You're not contesting it, and we'll go away. Okay. So meaning, okay, you don't have to pay anything. Oh, and also when you sign the document, you're agreeing to abide by all of the laws and the rules in the future. Okay. So most people, they gladly sign it because they're like, okay, sure, okay, I don't have to pay anything. I sign this, and you'll go away. You'll be out of my hair. And blah, blah, blah. Okay, and so what happens is the government, then they get this document, and then they go to the press, and they act falsely like it's some sort of weird victory for them. Like, look, I got this person to sign this document. They signed a consent decree. Yippee! Let's have a celebration. Okay, but then when you break it down, okay, what does that mean? What does that really mean? Okay, well, they signed a document, and they said they don't admit to anything that the government's saying. Okay, so how is that a victory? Well, okay, it's not really a victory if you think about it that way. And then they sign the document, and the document also says, oh, that they agreed to abide by the laws in the future. Okay, so how is that a victory? Because the reality is that whether they sign the document or not, everybody's already obligated to abide by the laws. So they're not giving away anything or agreeing to anything that they already had to do. So anyway, it's called a consent decree. So they're consenting to go by the rules in the future, even though according to them they've already gone by the rules in the past, blah, blah, blah. It's somewhat of a meaningless political document. And so that's why the attorney said it's a face-saving it's a face-saving mechanism for the government. You see, in other words, if they didn't have them sign off on it, so it kind of works like this. The government, they waste everybody's time, they raid the company, they mess everything up, they screw everything up, okay? Now, if they just go away, right, and don't harass anybody, then it's going to actually look kind of bad, because then they're going to be like, yeah, the SEC is just terrible, disgusting people. They raided the company, they halted the stocks, they did this, they made all these accusations, and then they never went to court, and they never did anything, okay? Then you would say, let's just shut down the SEC. They're just wasting everybody's time. They're screwing everybody up, okay? But when the SEC gets somebody to sign a consent decree, then it allows them to save face, and then they can say, see, I didn't waste any time. I got this guy signed this document, and he said he's going to agree to the laws. Okay. But it means nothing. He's already got to agree to the laws. It's like you signing a document saying, I agree not to murder anybody. Okay, well, guess what? You already can't murder anybody. It's already illegal to murder anybody, whether you sign the document or not. You're not allowed to murder people. Okay, so anyway, that's pretty much what it is. So apparently they got a few people to sign up on some consent decrees. It means absolutely nothing. None of them paid any money. None of them did anything. Blah, blah, blah. It's some sort of meaningless document. But it's something they use off and on for years and years.
Do you think that big government and corporations are bad for America?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So big government and big corporations are bad for America because they get together, they conspire together, they create laws to prevent smaller companies from competing. They create lots of regulation that only the big companies can afford to adhere to. They create monopolies that are bad for the consumer, and they basically lessen competition. So they create situations where other people can't compete and bring other good products to the marketplace. So, yeah, definitely, I believe that big corporations and big government agencies are absolutely terrible for America. And not only do I believe that, but Ron Paul believes that, lots of libertarians believe that, and they want to see that they believe that's a corrupt system, and they want to see that totally dismantled.
What did President Ronald Reagan say about the government in these situations?
Right. So Ronald Reagan, in one of his most famous and best statements ever, said this. He said, government is not the solution to the problem. Government is the problem. And those were great words that Reagan spoke, and very true words that he spoke. And those words were extremely true in this particular case. When you analyze what happened, when you look at the facts, you look at the situation, you see that what happened here was all of the problems were solely caused by government. Okay? What happened? FDA, the government, they created a new law which prevented a legal product from coming to the marketplace. They said, we're going to call that illegal, you can't sell it. That ruined the company financially. It ruined the distribution. They had to throw away $3 million worth of products. They had to throw away all kinds of advertising. They had to tell 22,000 distributors, sorry, we can't deliver. Government says no. Okay? They had to refund who knows how many big amounts on credit card chargebacks that were now coming in, because a lot of these people bought this product with credit cards, and now all of a sudden those people just simply did chargebacks on their credit cards for, I think, like at least $250,000 or more, and that caused big problems. It caused bank accounts to be frozen. So when you break it down, Ronald Reagan's words were true. There were no problems before the government started interfering. The government interferes, the FDA changes the rules, big problems, huge problems. Okay, then what happens later? Then, well, at least the stock was still trading, but then shortly after that, the SEC comes in, and they're like, oh, gee, there's a problem. Yeah, you can't, these patches can't be sold. Oh, I got it. Here, we'll help everybody. We're going to go ahead and halt trading on the stock. So the legal stock that you bought, we're going to say you can't sell it now legally. Okay, wonderful, great. So the SEC now just screwed everybody and stabbed everybody in the back, because now your legal stock, you now can't sell it. They're now saying that your stock is illegal to sell. Okay? So the FDA says you can't sell your product, that that's illegal. The SEC says it's illegal for you to sell your stock that you rightfully bought. And they said, okay, we're going to tell you what stocks you can buy and what stocks you can't buy, and what stocks you can sell. Okay, that caused a problem. Then you had, a combination of agencies that came in and stole 20,000 pounds of documents and computers and file cabinets in broad daylight from the company, and they never gave any accounting on that. That caused a problem. So the point being is pretty much every problem that this company suffered through and went through was caused by government interference. You see? Government interference. They come in on this horse, white knighting everybody, saying, oh, I'm your savior, I'm going to come help you, I'm going to come solve the problem. Well, guess what? There really wasn't a problem before they came along. They came along with a lie that they're going to solve the problem, but they created all of the problems. So, so basically I totally agree with Ronald Reagan that government is the problem. Okay, they're not the solution. In this case, they solved nothing, but they did nothing but create problems.